Call the meeting to order and start with the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Let's start at 3.0 OSBA presentations. We actually have Haley Purcell from insurance. Base insurance. All right. Oops. Let's go back.
Thanks for
Okay,
coming
so-
down, Haley. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Yeah, thank you
person.
guys for having me. So I'm Haley Purcell. I'm an attorney at the Oregon School Boards Association and
I just want to know if you're here because we have too many lawsuits.
no,
Oh,
that's not
okay.
why, that's not why I'm here. Lots of schools around Oregon have lots of lawsuits going on all the time, and that's not the particular reason why I'm here. At least that wasn't what I was told. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself and OSBA and PACE before I kind of launch into the highlights that I brought to you today. I've been an attorney for 18 years. So before I joined OSBA in 2011, I worked at a private law firm in Salem where I was an employment attorney. In my current role at OSBA, most of what we do is employment law related. We advise HR directors and superintendents in kind of smaller school districts that don't have HR directors on employment issues. And so that's probably what we spend 90% of our time doing. This is all in an effort to try to reduce claims from the PACE pool so that we're trying to save money for PACE, so that those funds are used for claims other than employment claims, because employment claims we can really mitigate and try to save money in that area. I am employed by OSBA. PACE itself has no employees. PACE contracts with OSBA for some services like legal services, my department. PACE also contracts with OSBA for lobbying services. So our lobbyists at OSBA do lobby on behalf of PACE and OSBA. All the K through 12 schools in Oregon are members of OSBA and have access to all the different services that OSBA offers, including policy services, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in detail with you. Policy, in my opinion, is the most important thing that school boards work on. So it's really important to be aware of your policies and know how that all fits into the puzzle. But we create sample policies for all of the state of Oregon to use. Most of the school districts in Oregon do utilize that service and have our sample policies. We also have a communications department that helps schools in crisis situations. So if you find yourself in a crisis situation, our communications department might be working with your superintendent or other administrators in the district to try to communicate about that crisis that's going on. We also have a board development department, and you're going to be hearing from someone in that department going over roles and responsibilities with you. She goes around the state, and others in her department go around the state and do this same type of roles and responsibility trainings, and they have other trainings that they offer for school boards there. PACE has all of the K through 12 school districts except for Portland Public, Salem Kaiser, and Beaverton. Those three are self-insured because they're so large, they're able to absorb the costs related to managing claims and settling claims and all of that. So they are self-insured, but all the other K through 12 schools in Oregon are members of PACE. All the community colleges are members of PACE. All the education service districts are members of PACE. And then around 100-ish of the public charter schools are also members of PACE. PACE is a nonprofit insurance pool. So it's not like a State Farm or a private insurance like you might get your car insurance through or something like that. It isn't aimed at making a profit. It's run by a board of volunteers. And those volunteers are appointed by the OSBA board of directors, and the OSBA board of directors are also volunteers. Those are school board members that have been elected by region to serve on the OSBA board. So then the OSBA board appoints board members to the PACE board, the insurance pool, and those volunteers manage the PACE pool. So the entire operation is nonprofit, and it's run by volunteers like yourselves that are school board members. Or, in the case of PACE, we have some business managers on that board and risk managers, HR directors, and there is one superintendent on that board as well. Just to give you an idea that these two programs are run by school board members and by public school employees. It's completely run and managed by people like yourselves and people like the people working in this district. So we have Terry here. He's a agent for the Rogue Community College. Your agent couldn't be here today. PACE is a little bit unique in that they will not sell their product directly to schools. Schools have to go through an insurance agent. And so each school in Oregon has an insurance agent that obtains the PACE insurance for your district. And that's mainly just for administrative reasons, because the insurance agent can manage all of the paperwork side of that. And then PACE doesn't have to do that internally. At least that's my understanding, Terry, is that. Got it. Okay, so Terry's here. In case you guys have any questions about coverage, I'm not an expert on the coverage document or that sort of thing. I'm more the expert on what kind of questions we get from school board members and administrators, what kind of lawsuits I see coming through. And that area, if there's a coverage question, it usually is dealt with by your agent or claims department, which is in a totally different entity. I said at the beginning, PACE doesn't have any employees and they contract with OSBA for legal services. They contract with a place called Special Districts Association of Oregon for claims management and risk management and underwriting services. So PACE has two different entities that they kind of coordinate with to provide this insurance product to schools. Any questions about that kind of framework before I kind of move into more content? Okay. So I was asked to talk to you all about your legal responsibilities as board members, kind of some of the common pitfalls that I've seen from school board members, and then PACE coverage and when it might be available to you and when it might not be available to you, so that you can hopefully avoid some of these things where you might end up not having coverage for something that you're doing. So starting with your legal responsibilities, almost every single thing that happens in a school and almost every single thing that you do is regulated by a statute. It's very statutorily driven. Every session, people are super focused on schools. Everybody wants to have some sort of say in how schools are run. So like out of this last legislative session, we have new statutes that impact 40 of our policies. So 40 of your policies have been impacted by the last legislative session. Our office is going through all of those new bills, updating the policies, and that policy update will be coming out mid-August. But it is very highly regulated and statutorily controlled. So starting with kind of the legal status of a school district. All school districts are bodies corporate, and the school board is authorized to transact all business coming within the jurisdiction of the district and to sue and be sued. It's lovely that they basically tell you you have control over everything, but remember, if you do it incorrectly, you could be sued. This is in the first sentence. Pursuant to law, district school boards have control of the district schools and are responsible for educating children residing in the district. So a very, very, very big responsibility, obviously. You are in charge of educating all of the children residing in the district and have responsibility over all of the business that's being conducted. And this statute is reflected in your board adopted policy BB. And I have given your staff a PDF of this, so you can receive a copy. All of these links go directly to the policies that I'm referencing in the slide. So if you care to look at them, you have access to those in that PDF. So speaking of policies, when you look at your policies at the bottom of them, they oftentimes have statutory references. And so that's where you would go to find where that policy came from. A lot of the policy that you have comes directly from statute. Some of them you're required by law to have. There's a law that says school districts shall have a student bullying policy, for example. That's one of your required ones. And then it lists out exactly the language you have to have in that policy. It says school districts bullying policy will say, and then it lists all the things you have to put in there. And it doesn't leave you a lot of room for creativity or changing it, because if you did that, then you wouldn't be in compliance with that law. And many of these laws are required to be followed in order to obtain state funding. So if you don't have exactly the language that the legislature is requiring you to have, you can be found non-standard and lose your funding. Yes.
So we just came through a contentious couple of years where school boards in some areas of the state didn't really like what the state was doing and attempted to go their own way, but they're actually creations of the state by state statute. So even though it says that school boards are doing all the business, they don't really get to do what they want.
Correct. And we're going to go to the kind of fleshing out of this overall statute. So it says you have control over everything. But like I said, everything you do is statutorily controlled. So the next statute I was going to talk about is this one that literally lists out all of your powers. One of them is set school calendar. And I added here subject to legal requirements because setting the school calendar is literally prescribed by statute. You can't actually just pick at random the calendar that you want. There are statutes that say school or kids cannot be educated on the following days. So you know, if you did that, you would be in violation of that law. You could be considered non-standard. So for every power you have, there are a number of statutes that kind of define how you can operate within that power. I was considering whether or not to even talk about this next one, adopt textbooks and instructional materials, because this is a very hot topic. The other thing I want to say before I go into this is that if any of these issues that I bring up today have happened or are happening in your district, that was not the focus of putting them into this PowerPoint. I literally talked to hundreds of people, lots of schools. These are just common themes. So if your school is district is currently dealing with curriculum challenges or book challenges, you're not alone. That's happening everywhere else as well. We were getting lots of questions about this. And it's interesting how these questions change over time. For the first decade of my employment with OSBA, I never had one question about a book challenge, not one. And then the last 2 years, it's all the time we're getting questions about removing books from the library. So the statute does give the school board the authority to adopt textbooks and instructional materials. But like I said, that's subject to a lot of other statutory requirements. And I've linked 2 board policies here that address textbooks and instructional materials in the process that you have to go through to remove materials from the libraries or the schools in some other way. There are many more than these 2. I didn't want to have like a 50-page handout for you all. I wanted to have kind of a quick document resource for you. So I picked out 2 of them, but there are more of them. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with a challenge to some curriculum materials or a book challenge, it is very, very important that you refer to your policies that are in place and that you follow them. I said that I'd never heard of this for the first decade of my career, but once it started coming to my attention, I did some research. And this is not a new issue for schools. There was a US Supreme Court case in 1980, actually, that addressed this. And a school board had removed materials from a library, and some of the students sued the school and the board members individually, alleging that they were violating their First Amendment right to read that material. That US Supreme Court decision, they couldn't reach a unanimous decision, and there was no majority opinion. So there were just a variety of opinions on this, but kind of what the several of the judges looked at was that the school board had failed to follow their policy. Their policy had said you have to get a committee together, you have to have parents and staff on this committee, and they review the curriculum and decide, should we remove this or keep it? That was their policy. You guys have a similar policy. That group met. They forwarded their decision to the school board, and the school board said, well, we don't agree with you. We're removing it all from the library. So they didn't follow their process. And that's what caused them to have problems there and have to take it all the way to the US Supreme Court. So anyway, that's just one example of how there are, you have this duty to adopt textbooks and instructional material, but there are limits to that. You're also required to implement equity-focused policies. I've talked about how I think that's the most important role that you have. Enter into contracts. There are certain contracts that the school board itself has to approve. And then others have been delegated in policy to the superintendent and the superintendent's designee, but there are a variety of policies that address that topic. And then I've linked your policy here that talks about these powers and duties that reflects the statute that I just kind of talked through. Individual board member responsibilities. So individual board members have no authority to act on their own. You guys can only conduct business with a quorum vote. You can't go off on your own and start doing things. You don't have any statutory authority to do that. And if you do, that's where you're going to see probably some personal liability if things start going wrong, if you're trying to do things on your own. And this is also reflected in your board policy, which is linked in the document. Okay, so risks that we commonly see kind of coming from school boards. Policies. So failing to keep the policies updated. These policies are basically a roadmap for your district staff. So for example, the bullying policy that I referenced that's required by law. It has several steps that a school district has to take in investigating a bullying complaint from a student. And if they don't follow that process, then they are out of compliance with the statute. These statutes get revised all of the time. So if you're not on top of getting the most recent version of these policies, then your district is automatically not in compliance with the law. And when an administrator goes to look at that bullying policy, they will be following some procedure that's outdated. So it's extremely important. I don't know if you guys subscribe to the policy service through OSBA, but we send out quarterly updates. And it might be one of those tasks that you're like, oh, let's push that off. It's kind of boring to read through all these policies, but it is really, in my opinion, the most important thing that you do as a school board is make sure that those policies are updated so that your staff knows what they're supposed to do in order to complete their job duties. Failing to follow policies, and this is oftentimes just because a board member doesn't know a policy exists. Literally, anytime you're deciding or contemplating doing something, you should check to see if you have a policy, because you probably do. There's a policy that covers almost every single thing. The legislature has anticipated every single thing that you might do and has written a law, and then there's a policy that matches that. In recent years, I hadn't seen this in the first decade of my career with OSBA either. Some school boards have started changing policies kind of at random without consulting with legal counsel or without following their own policy on policies. So you have a policy that tells you this is how we revise policies. And school boards will just randomly change a policy without any sort of public input, and then the public is upset about it. Then lawsuits come. We did see one school district that did that, and they were sued by 3 different groups, individuals. The teachers union sued them. Some random community members sued them. A bunch of people sued them because they just changed a policy without following their policy. And ultimately a judge told them that the policy they had created was unconstitutional. It violated the Oregon Constitution. So they were required to repeal that policy. So just really important that if you're, considering changing one of your policies, that you make sure that whatever change you're making is in compliance with the law, that you're consulting with legal counsel if there are laws involved, and that you're following the process that the board has adopted in its board adopted policy here.
Questions?
Okay, failing to follow complaint process. This is another common question we get from board members and from district staff is, we've got a complaint, what do we do with it? KL will be your friend. If you have been a board member for a while, you will receive tons of complaints as a board member. People will come up to you wherever you are. You're a board member, fix this problem for me, get that library book out of the library. People will come up to you. You should direct them to your public complaint policy KL and have them follow that process. If you find yourself in a position where you've got a complaint about a board member or a superintendent, make sure you're working with your legal counsel, or you can reach out to us and we can help you through that policy. I recently talked to a board member who had received, it was the vice chair, and a classified staff had filed a complaint against the superintendent and the board chair. This is not this district, obviously. And the vice chair called me and was like, I don't know what to do. How do I process this? And I said, okay, well, let's look at KL. It tells you that you need to take that complaint against the superintendent and the board chair into executive session and discuss it as a board. You need to let your superintendent know that this complaint has been received about him. You need to look at his contract to make sure you're following the contract language that you have with your superintendent. And then the board votes whether to investigate those complaints that have been filed. And she kind of went quiet and she was like, well, I've already met with the classified staff and I also interviewed this former administrator and I have a meeting to meet with this other person on Monday. And I was like, she goes, should I stop doing this? Should I stop doing my own investigation? And I was like, absolutely. You have no power on your own to do this investigation. I didn't talk to her about the fact that she may have violated the collective bargaining agreement by meeting with a union member without following that CBA and having a union rep present. I didn't want to totally freak her out, but I said, and she wasn't intentionally trying to break rules or anything. She was trying to do what she thought was her job, which ultimately maybe she is the person that does the investigation, but she needs to get the authority of the school board before she can do that on her own. So just kind of, that's a very common question and kind of a common pitfall we get from school board members is the complaint process. And just know that there are lots of complaint policies and procedures. Back to bullying, student bullying again, there's a complaint procedure for that. That is different than the KL. Sexual harassment has a different complaint procedure. So all the different kinds of complaints people could make have different complaint policies and procedures. So I'm not going through all of that today, but just wanted to make you aware.
So that's problematic. Pretty much people come to me and I say, KL. That's what you need to do. But if there's all these other ones, I generally don't try and figure out which bucket it's supposed to go. So
I
how
think,
many different complaint procedures are there?
I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to guess around 20. And this is an issue that is a problem not only for school board members and school staff, but attorneys that are trying to advise schools. It's definitely something that we're trying to work with the legislature to try to figure out how we can make this more streamlined and maybe have one complaint procedure for schools. But like I said, because everybody's so interested in schools and regulating and making statutes to govern your behavior, that one group gets together and they say, we need to have this policy and procedure for sexual harassment. And then the next group is, well, we need this for bullying. And so we end up with all these different processes, which is not great. I do not like it at all. Internally at OSBA, we're trying to figure out a way to create a more streamlined procedure, but we haven't been able to do that yet because of all the different statutory requirements. So thank you for noting it. I agree it's a problem. We're trying to figure out a solution.
But if a board member were to refer someone to KL, then they would not be in any legal trouble. I mean,
No,
right?
that's a good
Yes,
rule of thumb.
because
Just
at that
KL,
point, once the complaint's received, if it's not about the superintendent or the board chair, then the superintendent and his staff will know which complaint procedure to follow through with. The board shouldn't have to know that there are 20 different complaint procedures. Just get KL, get it to the district, and the district will sort it out where it needs to go.
yes,
And the few times we don't know, we generally call legal counsel and say, where would we look?
yes.
Yes,
And then we tell you, oh, there's 5 that apply, pick one.
right. But KL is really the go-to for
Yes.
most board members.
KL,
So.
Yeah.
The example you gave us. And maybe this is not the right time for this question, but what is the protection afforded to whoever this individual is that made these missteps? You mentioned somebody started their own
oh,
investigation.
yeah, so what's the
maybe
potential
seeking, yes,
that could happen there?
for them and for the district.
So for the district. And for the district, that union employee could file a grievance under their collective bargaining agreement saying you violated the contract because I wasn't given the right to a union rep before you met with me. If it was a one-on-one meeting with no witnesses, who knows what that employee could allege was said. It could have been something inappropriate said in that meeting or allegedly said in that meeting. And if that employee is disgruntled in any way, like they could definitely file a lawsuit against the district for that and the individual board member. My concern for that board member would be that since they were acting on their own, that they were not acting within the course and scope of their position as a board member, and therefore they wouldn't be covered by insurance.
They don't have any liability coverage.
not individually unless the board member purchases it on their own, but the problem is if you're not acting within the course and scope of what you purchased that, you know, if you purchased your own policy somewhere else for professional liabilities, you're still required under those policies, I believe. I mean, you're the expert here. You have to follow the law, otherwise they won't cover you. It's kind of a common theme in all insurance. So if you're not following the law by going outside of your role as a board member and investigating things without authority, you might not have coverage under those policies either. So
The other thing you can always tell people to do is to write an email to Tanya or to I. And if they put in the subject line complaint, we treat it like it's KL. If we get that, then there's other times if we just get a phone call and say something's happened, we're required by law to treat it as an official complaint. So, you know, bullying would be one of those. Sexual harassment, if someone calls and says, I was sexually harassed at the football game, we have to, by law, treat it as a written complaint and do a formal investigation. So it never hurts to say, please contact the superintendent and we will make sure that we're working with the individual to resolve the complaint.
I have a question, just from a practical sense, so. Say there is a scenario as a board, individual board member, a person has a complaint or whatever, and we're kind of do the Gary, but KL. Practically, what does that mean? Like, I just went online and looked up policy District 7, and then it has KL. But there's a lot of different stuff here, like, is there, when you say that, are we pointing them to like?
There could be a complaint form as part of that.
KLAR.
Yeah.
It's a,
So as a practical. I'd like to find out where that is on here, because I'm not seeing that, so I'll keep looking at it a little bit, but.
It is there under policies.
yeah, you'll see
But it's the
KL
second one down.
under it, you'll see KLAR and the AR are the procedures.
Gotcha.
and it's always, you know, interesting to figure out, is it a complaint or is it a concern? So, you know, we know that we're gonna be changing how we cook meals this year, and we have staff members that are concerned because they may be working harder than last year, but that's not really a complaint, that's a concern. So, but I still appreciate knowing that so that we can address concerns. But, you know, it's always fair to just say, have you talked to the superintendent? Have you talked to the building principal? You know, what have you done to express your frustrations or your concerns? And if the first stop is you, then I'm glad to meet with you and whoever has got a complaint or concern if they feel like they don't want to meet privately. So, but we do want to make sure that we have some kind of record that we are informing the school district so that we can serve everyone's needs. And we're pretty responsive to that. So am I fair in saying that?
I know in my own personal experience, talking forever or to everybody is that often, you know, I'll say they want to complain. And so I take them to policy KL and they never do anything with it.
We have very few back.
Right, nothing comes because they want to complain that it didn't get picked for this, whatever it might be, legitimate or concern more than complaint. And so please go to the policy, please let, this last year has been nice to have a strong communication, open communication. And so just feel free to, you know, write the board, write the superintendent, you know, do what you need to do to feel heard.
And if they,
And knowing that you guys know how to disseminate.
and if they just send you an email, I'm complaining, then you just forward that on to us and we're on it.
Mhm.
We'll get right after it.
And I can see how you can say it in a really positive way too, like, hey, like if you do follow this official KL. You know, the school district has to take it very seriously, and they will respond, it's like making a positive thing,
Right, and again, if
they can
it's,
still choose not to do
they
it.
say bully, it's keyword that sends them, you know, it's handled differently. If it's sexual harassment, if there's,
Mhm.
and y'all.
I can say from personal experience, I've had probably sounded really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad. And so I told them, Okay, you gotta you gotta write it down, use KL. And you just won't do it. And so at that point, does it really real? You don't know. But for as bad as it sounded, seemed like they would have wanted to write it down and they don't. So,
Oftentimes even I've heard, oh, you should follow up on that, or, it was like, oh, it's just too much time, I don't. Like, well, what about the next kid? Or the other people, that we do as a district want to take everything seriously. And at least want to look into whatever thoughts are, concerns.
I know, I've had people say, can I just talk to you? And so, sure. And then they'll be complaining about something and I tell them, well, and mostly this is before KL became so prominent, but there's a procedure. Have you talked with the teacher? Have you talked with the principal? Have you talked with the district? Because by the time it gets to the board, we are the final authority, and your board of appeal, really, and you don't want us as the first stop here. We're the last stop.
Right. You're the review committee if it gets up to your level, so you need to refer.
And then I always tell the superintendent, I got this call, I had this talk, so that they're aware of it. If they even have the hint then of there's a problem here, then they can look into it and find out what's going on and be prepared if somebody does follow through with the KL to know, what can be done.
Communication.
All right, so I don't have any time, so I'll just kind of quickly talk about executive session. So first of all, if you have an executive session that has been set up, make sure that whatever is discussed in that executive session is not discussed outside of the executive session, because you can cause all kinds of liability for the district if you start talking about like confidential personnel information that's discussed in executive session, or if there's a student matter being discussed, that can cause problems as well. The other problem we see with a lot of school boards is emails, text messages, and phone calls. So if a majority of you are emailing or texting about something district related, that's actually a public meeting that hasn't been properly noticed, and so that's an illegal executive session. And we're seeing more and more complaints being filed against board members for that. And one of the reasons you should be personally concerned about this is that if the OGEC, if there's a complaint filed with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission about this, board members can be fined up to $1,000 each, and that cannot be paid for by the district. So that's an individual fine that the board member has to pay themselves if they violate executive session law. If you've consulted with legal counsel, then that fine will be waived. And I have seen that where boards have consulted with legal counsel and the attorney was incorrect. The OGEC thought that they shouldn't have been in executive session. And so those school board members got a letter saying, don't do that again, but they didn't get fined. So when in doubt, consult with your legal counsel about whether or not you should be meeting in executive session. And then email, text message is just completely not allowed. So you can't be having meetings via email, text message, and all of those things are subject to public meeting laws as well. And we have seen public submitting requests for those kinds of records recently. So that's a new kind of emerging issue. Board superintendent relationship, Kristen from OSB is going to be here, I think, working on this to a certain degree, but just make sure that if you've got any issues going on between you and your superintendent, that you're looking at how is your communication working, are you communicating with them? I know that when I talk to school board members who have issues or concerns about their superintendent, my first thing is always, well, what did your superintendent say about that? And they say, well, I haven't talked to my superintendent. Go talk to your superintendent. That's the first step before you're calling legal counsel. Talk to your superintendent. If the communication issues aren't getting worked out after trying to have conversations, then you can call and we can try to figure things out. But that's great that you're having Kristen come, because she's really good at explaining the kind of the relationship between the school board and the superintendent and what's the responsibility. Like I said at the beginning, so about PACE coverage. So we can't say in advance whether something's going to be covered or not. We can only make decisions about coverage at the time that the claim comes in. So we get asked a lot of hypothetical questions about, well, if we did this, would we be covered? And it's like, maybe, but we can't make that decision until the claim is made. As board members, as long as you are following your policies and your procedures that are in place and following the laws that are in place, you should have PACE coverage for most of the things that you're doing in your role as a school board member. It's when you stop following your policies and stop following the laws that you open yourself up to kind of personal liability and liability for the district. And these are common situations of personal liability. So like I said, the executive session violation, the district can't pay that $1,000 fine for you. So that would be personal liability, ethics violations. You know, if you've got some sort of situation where one of your family members owns a construction firm in the area and the district, you vote to hire that firm, that would be an ethics violation for you. And any sort of fallout from that would be something you personally, that would be a financial personal burden for you. So just make sure that you're aware of the ethical responsibilities you have, and you do have a policy on that. Defamation claims is another one where I've seen PACE not cover board members. So if you're like out on social media and you're saying bad things about each other, or district staff, and somebody files a defamation lawsuit against you, you may not be covered if you're out there saying false things about people. I've seen that happen a couple of times where PACE did not indemnify a board member for their speech that they were saying out in the community.
When board members get in trouble for that, is it because they're usually talking about staff, or are they talking about other board members? What are you usually seeing?
You know, I'm not recalling the specific details, but I feel like one was like a contractor of the district that the board member was disparaging, saying this contractor, you know, did an awful job, but it was more false. There were false allegations in there. So that's the one that's coming to mind. It doesn't happen that often, but I do remember that we didn't cover it. So.
Okay.
And then some additional resources here. I've got a link to your policies, which I think some of you've already found online. The Oregon Attorney General's Public Record and Meetings Manual. So if you ever have a question about a public meeting question or a public record question, this is a great resource. And then the Ethics Guide for Public Officials. I suggest that you look at that as well, so that you know the bounds of the ethical laws that you're under as a board member. And then in terms of contacts for OSBA and PACE, if you have a legal question, you can email pacelegal@osba.org. Policy is Spencer Lewis. Legal training like this is that email address. And then these three you probably won't have to interact with. And if you have any questions about this presentation in particular, feel free to reach out to me directly and I can talk through any of the issues. Yes.
You mentioned text messages. So if the superintendent were to text the entire board about some bus crash or something to that effect, did we just violate Oregon open meeting law, or how's that work?
Yeah, so no, if the text message goes out to you all and you don't respond, then you're good. If you start responding with things like, oh, you know, I think that we need to fire the bus driver. And then somebody else is like, yeah, we need to fire the bus driver. Let's have a board meeting to discuss firing the bus driver. And you guys start texting about like what you're going to do. That's discussing district business as a forum, and that would violate the law.
But if I send out a text saying there was a bus crash and they responded, were there any injuries? No injuries. That's not breaking any. Right.
I don't think that would violate.
Right.
It has to be discussing district business. So.
And in even voting on district business, definitely breaking.
Yeah, for sure. If you're making decisions. That's
Yeah, you
100%
cannot make
of the
decisions.
But whether or not you're, deliberating is where the question of facts going to come. But the best practice is unilateral communication, and not, if you want to have a conversation, maybe pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to know more about this bus accident. Can you tell
So
me?
often what I'll do is, especially for a week before board meeting, and I want them to have some information, I'll say, this will be coming up next week. And I always start it with, do not respond all to this email.
Yep.
Right? We're gonna be talking about this next week. If you have questions ahead of time, please come by and see me, call me. I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
That's what I do too when I email school boards.
Right. Okay.
All right, well, feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any other questions, and looks like Kristen is here. Take the lead.
Haley, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hi.
How about Terry? Do we have any questions for Terry?
Oh, yeah, Terry, coverage,
What's that?
any questions for Terry?
Terry, any questions about our coverage specifically, folks?
I don't
Do you
currently.
usually-
Who's our normal agent?
Kristen Wick.
Okay.
Yeah,
For some reason.
we're
I thought we were
the
missing.
same agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just got our team out of public entity, college.
You have a.
Your wife Sharon.
Oh, I do too.
We have something in common.
Thank you so much. We
Thank you,
appreciate
Haley.
it. Are you going to Three Rivers now? Oh, we were there? From Salem? For 30 minutes? Thank you very much. You're very kind.
I smell like cinnamon. I have to go wash my hands.
So they're getting the thumb drive with Kristen's PowerPoint put on there.
At the end there, she threw out a bunch of links and things. It might be helpful to get.
You'll get the PowerPoint. Yeah. Tanya, we're gonna get the PowerPoint, right? From,
Yes,
from
yes.
Haley.
You want it printed or do you want it,
They want it so they can
You want it-
click on the links.
then I'm gonna email it to you.
Well, that's the first
It's
presentation.
a break time if you guys wanna take a quick break and. Go to the restroom or. We get anything set up.
I'm gonna get a water. Anybody need another one?
You guys have a recycle bin?
Yes, please.
Sure, I'll take one.
Good,
Is there somewhere I can put this one?
I can grab it for you. It's in our kitchen. Oh, yeah, I'll show you what. I'll take it. We're gonna get water.
That's the first time we've had a presentation like that.
Yeah.
Need anything? All right.
Got a peanut butter cup in there? Are you sharing? Thank you.
Well, only because respect.
Howdy, how are you doing? I'm doing really well. How was the drive?
Uneventful. Long and uneventful. Hi, Craig. How are you? Hi,
Are you coming from Portland?
Yeah, came down last night, did Three Rivers this morning. Hi, Gary.
Yeah.
It's so different in 3D.
Oh.
How was Three Rivers this morning?
Good,
Good.
good,
Yeah.
yeah, it was great.
They had two brand new people, first meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah, yep, 2 new people. Let's see, that made this.
We have twice that many this year. We have 4.
Right,
That was their first.
That
Oh.
was their swear-in meeting.
yeah,
Oh,
it was their swearing meeting.
Wow.
It's pretty late in the month of July. Swearing.
Yeah.
It is.
At least they finally took their fines down.
The business manager in Butte Falls was adamant that we had to have our board meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning on July 1st.
Oh, yeah.
The earliest possible time after July 1. Okay. 6 o'clock in the morning, or when,
Wow.
yeah. You're a little bit insane.
Get the angle, but okay.
How long has she been?
Long time. Her grandma's there, long time.
Well, Kristen, we've done so many hours together. We've
I
lost,
know.
some of us.
That's right.
I bet your car just knows its way here. by
That's right. I can just close my eyes. Car drives its way.
So a couple years ago, we did, what's it called? Diane
the Diane FCF Memorial Scholarship Program, which unfortunately is discontinued.
Oh.
Yeah,
So it was 16 hours we had to commit as a board, 18 hours we had to commit as a board to trainings. And they gave us $5,000 for scholarships to use for.
And in the middle of a superintendent search.
And we also had a superintendent search.
Hmm,
We
We
logged.
were having a meeting.
We did pay, the district did pay 4,000 something
mhm.
to get that 5,000.
Yes.
Great. It came back to you plus a little bit in a scholarship. Yes, that's right.
So how's your graduate program going?
It will be done in a few months. We needed some data from ODE that got held up.
Let's see.
That's what I know, right?
Ryan and
How is that
Susan.
It's always be you.
And
Ryan and Susan.
so,
As per
so that
your
put me back a
instructions.
couple of months. But it's in
Well-
dissertation realm right now, so Yeah.
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you.
Oh, you've done your dissertation?
I'm in the middle of it, but I
Okay.
needed some data from ODE that they were like, sorry, it's a few months behind.
Oh, my wife depends on Thursday.
Oh, wow, how
Yeah.
exciting. Oh, my
I
goodness.
won't be home, so
Oh,
I hope it'll be great.
oh, wow. Oh, my
I'll
goodness.
be at our administrative retreat.
Oh. Wow.
Either there'll be a lot of tears.
Yeah.
And I'll pull myself out of the administrative retreat or it'll be a smiley face.
Oh,
I'm sure it'll be great.
yes.
Who are you doing your cert? Rogan State?
No, it's at a small private university in Seattle.
Oh,
And I went there specifically for who my chair is,
okay,
because who's a researcher in board governance. That's
okay,
what I'm doing mine.
all right.
Currently, I love this work enough to write a whole dissertation on it.
Not get myself to do the dissertation part.
So whenever you all want to start,
Oh, we're waiting for,
you waiting for somebody?
are we? No, we're all here.
We are.
No, we can start without Dan.
Who's on first?
We can start without Dan.
So in your dissertation, did you have cranky board members in there?
Do I have one?
Do you have any cranky board members in there?
Cranky board members in my dissertation? Yeah, well, I had to survey like board members all over the state, and I put a survey out, and the cranky ones just didn't answer my survey.
Have to open the link.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Miles from OSBA. Thank you so much for having me. I've worked with your district for a while, as Debbie and Cassie were just talking about, in multiple forms. It's been a number of years. We'll see, I think I was here last year in person for a little while.
Mhm.
And so it's nice to be here again, nice to see you all again, and meet some of you for the first time. I have been with OSBA for 7 years now. And prior to that, I was an administrator at Portland Public Schools. I live up near Portland. I was in charge of the charter schools program there. I am also a newly elected board member in Tigard Tualatin School District. So I'm with you, new board members in your new board service. So I know this part, but I'm learning the ins and outs of my district as well. So anyway, welcome to the board and thank you for having me here today. We're gonna do roles and responsibilities, and those of you who have sat through this before, it's gonna be a little different than we have done it in the past. We're gonna, so this will be new to you, thankfully, right? We are going to hit some of the big major points through some scenarios and talk through those. We are gonna talk about the research-based roles of the board that have been shown to impact student achievement positively. Because it's important that you know the ways in which you can positively impact student learning. And then we're gonna talk through some scenarios that we have seen. These don't come from nowhere. And talk about how you might address those if they came up for you. And of course, I want to leave room for questions. This is discussion oriented. So if something comes up that you want to talk about, let's do that. With that, what I would love to do is go around and get your name, your time on the board, even if it's just like a few hours or whatever, and what you hope to get from today. Would love to hear that. So Let's start with Dustin.
All right, my name is Dustin and I'm a new board member. Second official meeting. And yeah, just I'm a sponge, so want to learn about OSBA and just I mean, big on context. I already had like a question about funding and everything, so
Okay,
at some point I'll ask that question.
So Debbie Brownell, I think I've been on the board about 22 years. And so every board is different,
Mhm.
but we have to act as one as a board. And unity of purpose in serving the kids as best as we can with the resources we have. But just getting to know each other and figure out how we can communicate better and be that integrated board to move forward is my goal.
Mhm.
Excellent. Cassie Wilkins, I think this is my 4th year on the board, and I'm just looking, I'm a sponge as well, information, so just refreshing, getting a refresher course. Great, learning more.
Hi, I'm Trish Evans. I'm the Director of Secondary Education, so on Tim's leadership team. This is my 17th year at the district office. So been here the longest officially as a district leader.
Mhm.
For me, I was excited when he asked me to participate. I'd never done one of these before and was elected, delegated the policy committee chair role.
Voluntold.
Voluntold, and so just learning a little bit more, deal a lot with policy and some of the procedure stuff and looking forward to learning a little bit more about
Thank you.
it.
Tim Sweeney, superintendent. I guess I'm starting my 35th year in education and starting my 17th year as a superintendent. Oregon.
What would you like to get out of today, Tim?
Oh, I think some unity of purpose is always beneficial
Mhm.
and just the more I'm able to interact with this new board, the more we will be able to understand each other and the hopes and dreams that this board has and the direction we want to take this district. So that's always critical.
Great.
So how do I serve the board and their will?
Thank you.
I'm Danny Huber Cantola, also work on Tim's director team. Apparently, I'm not as old as Trish. I've only been here 13 or 11 years. Actually, she's a couple of years younger than me, but I give her that time. I'm hoping like the rest of it, just to learn a lot about how boards and district leadership should interact with one another and hopefully build relationships so that we work together as a team going forward.
Thank you.
Gary Richardson, I've been on board 20 years. And I hope to understand when there's 3 different factions on the board, how you can still have a vote that moves the district forward.
Thank you. Ben.
I'm Chad Dibdall, newly elected board member, and just learn as much as I can today. I don't have any specifics. I'm sure I'll have questions.
Thank you.
I'm Joe Schmidt. I'm newly elected. I spent 40 years on working with independent school boards, but never with public school boards. So I'm really interested in learning more in terms of the difference and the nuances.
Thank you. Are we missing somebody?
One,
Yes.
someone's in Canada roaming around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a good excuse.
Yeah.
They think family reunions are more important than now. I don't know where that comes from.
Wow.
But we are recording somebody.
Okay,
Back around.
okay, great. I just want to make sure I wasn't like skipping somebody or we weren't waiting for somebody. Okay, thank you. Okay. Anybody heard of Simon Sinek? Anybody worked with- Okay, great. We, this is not like he is not the focus of this presentation, but he has a concept called Start with Why. And we talk a lot about, and he mostly focuses on corporate stuff, but the aim of this motto is we talk a lot about what we do and we talk a lot about how we do it, but really starting with the core of why we do it moves forward what we're doing. And that's really the important piece of why we're doing what we're doing. And so when you entered board service, or when you got reelected, when you choose to keep running for the board, when you chose to run for the board the first time around, we ask you to reflect on why you're on the board. And so I'm going to ask you that question. Why are you here? Or why are you in the district? I want this to be invitational to everybody too, and everybody at this table to feel like they can participate as well. And so I will, if you don't want to answer this question, that's fine. I'm not going to go around the table and make you all answer, but I'm gonna invite you all to answer this. I will model this. So why I'm on my school board. I have spent 7 years talking the talk about this and going around the state and, telling boards what to do and what not to do, et cetera. And I'm a parent in my district, but really what I felt like it was probably my turn to walk the walk and to sit on the other side and actually do the things that I advise other people to do. So that was largely my why I ran for my school board. So I just want to put out there as you reflect and just ask you again, I won't force everybody to answer, but if you wanted to share, what is your why? Why did you run for your board? Or why are you at the district?
Well, I'll take that.
Please.
So I think that there's a point in my daughter being in school where I realized that a good community needs a good education system, and a good education system needs a good community. And so it was kind of this being on the board was that intersect that moment where I could be helpful to both. So that's why.
Thank you.
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to spend 40 years working with young people in independent schools as a teacher, administrator, school leader, and absolutely loved my career and have been committed to young people since I was 25 years old, 24 years old. And I moved here 5 years ago. I retired, moved here about 5 years ago. And I was looking for ways to give back to the community. And I knew that it would come from my own personal experiences and gifts and talents. So my commitment is to a quality education for young people and a quality experience for young people. And that's why I want to serve the board, so I can do my part for this community that has given a great deal to me the last 5 years.
Thank you. Anybody else like to share?
So, I didn't start out wishing to be a board member, but, I started volunteering for the district when my son was in kindergarten. And when opportunities came up and people asked me to apply and do stuff, I said yes. But why am I still a board member? I think it comes down to, I believe strongly in education. I believe strongly in a public education, bringing all segments of the community together. And people, well, you don't have a child in this anymore. And actually, my last cousin is no longer even in the system anymore. But it's not like I don't love every child. I want the best for everyone. Went through this district growing up and had so many opportunities. My son had opportunities, and I want everybody else to have opportunities also. And we have such a great district. We really do. We have award-winning departments, and I've worked with such outstanding administration and teachers and volunteers in this district, and I just want to keep the good stuff going.
I'll jump on into that. I've lived in this community for 16 years and cared greatly for it. And I think the best way to impact the community in the future is through our kids. And so I signed up and put my name out there to see if people wanted me to stand in one of these positions. And the community elected me, and that's why I'm here, is to help our kids.
I think education is a great equalizer. I think that it gives all kids an opportunity to be the best that they can achieve. And I want to be a part of helping grow young people. And so that's my life.
Thank you.
And the lunches.
And the lunches and improving lunches.
And the food.
That's my designated life.
Thank you.
I'll share. I think I'm happy you brought this up. I have a whole past life in my previous career. And spent a lot of time with this model, but
Mhm.
and I had like a personal why and something around like collaboration with people and connecting people. And so I've always found myself in the leadership role in the organizations and things like that, comfortable in that. And so I think there, you know, like Gary mentioned earlier, there was a time where there was some concerned parents in the district, and I was one of them. I'm a parent of school age kids, and you know, you can talk and you can, you know, you can complain or whatever, but if you want to do something about it, I raised my hand and said, I'll be on the board. I think we need good people on the board that represent our community and our shared values, and happy to do it. I'm in a position to be able to volunteer and have the time to do it. So.
Thank you.
I'm just one of those goofy people that really loves school. Always loved it. Was always shocked to find out that there were people in the world that didn't love school as much as I did, and try to create systems that will allow every student to enjoy being at school as much as I enjoyed being at school. Loved it as a student, loved it as a teacher, loved being an administrator. So yeah, there's not much about school I don't love. So, yep.
Thank you, Tim.
I think like Danny, I got into education because I wanted to make an impact for each student that was in my classroom. Leadership and that whole direction in my career has really been about creating systems and supporting systems to help our district be better. This is my third district I've worked in, and thinking about what you were saying, Debbie, I feel like Grants Pass School District has some really strong, has a lot of really strong programs, teachers, things going on district-wide that are things we can be really proud of. My own two children went through Grants Pass School District, and I'm proud to say that they're graduates. So I want to help more kids feel like they have hope for their future, whatever they want to do post-secondary, but get them graduated and get them a plan for what's next.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's great. And we keep those things in mind as we go through the day, as you sit at the board table. That's important to return to. We can answer all of these questions at once, not individually. And again, I'm not going to go around the table and ask you this. This is sort of a collective answer. But why, in your mind, why do you think the board matters? And why do you think board culture matters? And then why does the relationship between the board and the superintendent matter? Or does it? Do any of these things matter? If they do, why do you think they do? And I'm not looking for like, that is wrong, that is right. But what, in your mind, why do these things matter?
Ultimately, the board is going to set a direction for the coming school year. And work with the superintendent is going to work with staff to make sure that we're implementing that vision and moving the district in that direction. So,
yeah.
Well, like the culture piece, I think it's important. Like I think Debbie was talking about unity. You know, the tone of the board is important, and you don't want to have a board where maybe it looks like things are okay, and then you all go off and like complain and, you know, talk to people in the community about what you really think or something. You know, you want an open dialogue and have a positive tone, and that sets the tone for the organization and for the district. And
as if there's turmoil at the top, there'll be turmoil throughout the system.
I think the board matters because it represents the community. in a broad fashion. I think that, the relationship with the superintendent is extremely important because the board should be involved in micromanaging it all. It doesn't have the time to get into the midst of it. It's the superintendent that's responsible for making all that happen.
Mhm.
So you need to have an honest, open relationship with the expectation that the superintendent's gonna do his or her job.
Mhm. Mhm. Great. All good stuff.
So. My point of view, we just had two contradictory things.
What's that?
We said we were gonna have like community culture. We said that the board represents the community. And I'm gonna say the community doesn't have a unity culture.
Okay.
We have two distinct factions, I'll call it, at a minimum, two.
Okay,
Okay. More.
okay.
So that is definitely going to be reflected at board level. So how do we deal with that? At board level?
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean,
No, that's a good point. How do you deal with that at a board level? Because you are all meant to come to the board with your life experience, with your multiple perspectives. If there only needed to be one perspective, there would only need to be one board member. Right? But in the end, you make one decision. Right? So you are meant to come to the table to have debate. And to have that debate, so the community can see you, have debate. I will say that, and I, your board is brand new, so none of this is happening. I'm not putting this on you. I say this to every single board. It is not conflict that is a bad word. It is combat. That is what is tough. And so if you have a community that you feel is that there are, multiple interests represented in your community, and that, those of you on the board are representing multiple interests that may impact decisions. Dustin was saying this, that you are still coming to the board table and reflecting one decision in the end. What is important is then how you communicate that decision, both as a board and as individuals afterward. So the relationship on the board is one that it's so important. This is part of the board culture, to build a relationship between all of you that is built on trust and respect. So that even if the board makes a decision with which you do not agree as an individual, you are not out there as an individual undermining that decision of the board. Now, if somebody comes up to you in the grocery store and is just like, hey, what happened? I missed the board meeting. What happened? How did you vote on this? Right? Is it okay to say, hey, this decision was made, I voted no? Sure, because they would have seen you at the board meeting having your discussion, I voted no. But there's a difference then between saying like, and my colleagues are, whatever, like this is going to go so badly, and that they made the worst decision in the world. There's a difference between that and saying, I voted no, this is going to move forward. I'm hoping this goes well. I'm going to support the will of the board. And there's a huge difference there. And that is messaging to the community too. That, yeah, you can have debate, you can disagree. And in the end, the one decision of the board is the thing that moves forward. And so you can represent multiple areas of the community, but understand that there is one decision that gets made after that, and that you're meant to function as unified, but not uniform. And it's not as easy as I'm saying it in words either, right? Like, oh, that's great, that sounds fantastic. And it's not easy. It takes continual practice. There is, and we will go through this, all kinds of research-based evidence that says the board matters so much when it comes to student outcomes. And we're going to go through some of that, but I want you to remember that the board, how you function matters to student achievement. And your relationship with each other and with the superintendent impacts student achievement directly. So you play a really important role, and we'll go through some of those specifics. Thank you all for your answers in that too. So this is, you're not meant to actually, read this tiny print. But what I wanted to give you is a tiny snapshot of one way in which you might look at data. This is one piece of data that when asked, who are your students? What is one way you might look at who your students are? This is demographics in certain ways. This is from a program called Forecast 5, which sort of sits on top of state reported data. It doesn't report everything for every single year. For example, it is not caught up to this year's free and reduced lunch reporting. But the gray bars are total enrollment. So you can see, just like every single other district, total enrollment went down in 21, 22. Yours seems to be climbing a little bit. Again, there are some racial and ethnic demographics there over time. The first year down there is 2012, and it goes through 2023. There are some special ed demographics there that stop in 2019. I did not go dig through ODE data to find the rest of it. I just took from Forecast 5. But this is one way in which you might answer one way. Who are your kids? But there are so many ways in which to know who your kids are. And so what are some kinds of ways? And this is where everybody's answer is, again, I'm not going around the table, but sometimes new board members are like, I don't know yet. I don't know how to answer this. But my question to you is, what are the kinds of ways in which you could know who are the students that you serve? What are the kinds of things you could go do, or the kinds of things that you could engage with your superintendent and his team in to get to know who are the students that you serve? And that could mean like existing things that, that some districts have student reps on their board. Some districts have, they have board meetings in schools sometimes. Some districts have student panels at times, but what are some of the ways or some of the questions you might ask to get to know who are the students that you serve? What do you think? Or what do you already do that you could share with your new colleagues?
So the population is kind of split into all sorts of data points.
Sure.
We've got how many kids are homeless, how many kids are in foster care,
Sure.
how many kids are in poverty situations. I was just talking to a retired teacher, and she said by the end of the year, when she had the trust of her students, she found out that over a third of her class had a parent in jail. I thought in Grants Pass, but that was the reality. And then there's the AP kids who are on track for college, and they have the support of their parents and community. And then there's the kids who are in Project Youth Plus because they've got the academic potential, but they may not have as much support as they need in their home life, really, to take them to college visitations and to encourage them how to save money and things like that. So, and then there's the racial element. We don't have very many Black students, for instance, but we've got a dozen different first language other than English languages out there in the district. So there's all kinds of ways to slice and dice the data. So how do we connect with the students? And there's volunteer opportunities. There's even just attending an athletic event or a musical concert or a performance of some sort shows support. I feel like I'm kind of representing community support. I belong to an organization that for several years passed out free dictionaries. And one of the things I always used to say is there are so many people in the community who are really working for your success. They want to see your success. And you don't have any idea who they are, but they think of you and want you to do well.
So I was gonna add on to, because you said volunteer opportunities, am I right that you volunteer in the class?
Yes.
I think that's, I've done that in the past, as far as like, just, it's like smaller groups, but like. The lunch line, whether it's at an elementary school or like at South where I used to volunteer. It's a great way just to see the students and actually, see who we represent. I don't know what would be appropriate at the board level for that kind of stuff at this point, but I know that I've been connected with students that way and I've seen them, just by being in schools. Meet kids and watch them in their element.
I
Yeah,
don't think there's any
absolutely.
inappropriate way.
Huh?
I don't think there's anything inappropriate.
About
To
volunteering.
continue,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose being paid
The-
would be wrong.
Events,
Can't be
you know, we were invited to graduations, this last year. I couldn't think of it being at the different events.
So on one level, slicing, dicing, looking at like this is useful. But in reality, even year to year, the kids are not the same. And so if I had passion, it would be that each student has a personal education plan, that we look at each student as an individual, figure out what that student needs, what's a good path for them to be able to achieve in the public school.
Yeah, there are many, many ways and good questions that, and a lot of that comes from your superintendent and his team. Like, what are the kinds of pieces of information that he brings to you? And what are the kinds of events you can go to or ways in which you can, slice data or look at or be involved. There's quantitative stuff that can come to you, then there's qualitative experiences that you can have. But just, thinking about in this community, what are the ways in which you can know who the students are that you serve?
I know one of the things we've tried to do over the years in our board reports is to have students come in and share and talk. I know over the years, there's been, a variety of programs that we've highlighted or outcomes that we've had students come in and share their experiences with. And I always felt like that kind of helped connect the board to who our students are and what they represent.
Yeah.
A reminder.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these decisions here affect.
That it's
them.
about kids.
Yeah. And when you see their parents come in,
Yeah.
because they're excited to present, that.
Yeah.
It kind of folds from that back. For why?
Yep.
That's great.
In my experience, one of the things that was always very helpful for the community, working in the school, you were connected, you knew, you had the qualitative, the quantitative input that provided you with the information that you needed. But one of the things that was really important for us is, in my experience, was to always have periodic, and I'm talking either annual or semi-annual, open sessions where you brought parents in and you asked them face up, what's your concerns? What are you happy about? What are you unhappy about? What's working? What isn't working for your children? What are they missing out on? What are they getting? And really drawing that information out of parents, and also doing it with kids through advisement programs and things like that. Where you bring groups of kids together and they share with you honestly, in open sessions where they can talk. Granted, someone will bitch and moan like kids can do, but for the most part, you're going to get an honest answer. From a quantitative standpoint, there are things that I would like to know as a new board member. For example, in the athletic realm, how many kids are being cut? Not how many are playing, but how many are being cut from sports teams who have a passion to play, but they're not getting the opportunity, or in drama, or in any of the extracurriculars, where they gain that sense of self-esteem and self-worth, which is really important to kids. I'd be interested in knowing how many kids are applying for four-year universities, two-year colleges, trade schools, whatever the case may be. Where are their aspirations when they're going to leave the school? And then I would be interested in knowing 5 years down the road, where did those aspirations lead them?
Mhm.
Where did they end up? Not did they graduate? That's not enough information. Was their life a success
Mhm.
5, 10 years down the road after they graduated school in back then, in the long term?
Mhm.
That to me is incredibly important data in terms of determining whether your school is doing the job it should be doing for your students.
Thank you. I'll just take a couple of these. It's important to look at what do you think are your current successes and challenges? I like to first highlight successes. What is going really well? Let's just take a couple of those and just a couple of challenges, but I want to start with successes. Because we focus a lot in education, and this is important. We focus a lot on continuous improvement, which is great. But I also think that sometimes we don't look enough at what we're doing really well. So I want to ask, and this is open to new board members as well, because you ran for the board for a reason, you know something about the district. But I'm asking everybody at this table also, what is going really well?
That guy right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
You.
Tim looks around.
Well, but, I mean, it's good you look at your team.
Very kind of you to say, so, thank you.
Yeah, I think the board proved itself when they hired Tim.
We've got a lot of really great things to celebrate, a lot of successes.
Good.
We have a graduation rate that continues to go up. We have award-winning programs that are recognized throughout the state and the region, not just statewide.
You're
We-
hearing one of them right now.
We are. That's the drum line. And it's fun today. Come back in 4 weeks and it's the same drum line doing the same.
That's
beat.
great.
Doing the same beat. We have
Asking about insulation.
We have created new programs this year. We've got an automotive shop going in. You know, hired a teacher. We've got some great mental supports, emotional supports for our students way down to kindergarten that we didn't have even a couple years ago. We are a district that is on the rise. And you saw that our enrollment's ticking back up and we think it's gonna do a bigger tick this year.
Good.
We had, like everybody, a tough time with COVID.
Yeah.
And we're starting to, you know, come out of that dip in that lull. We have really outstanding staff
Mhm.
that are part of the community, that care about our kids, care about their successes. Do we have teachers that aren't as great as other teachers? Sure, but we have plans to really work with all of our team, all of our teachers this year and get better at what we do. These two represent a group of 7 that are outstanding district office folks that are leading our principals to bigger and better things.
Mhm.
We go on our retreat this weekend. We're gonna lay out our vision for the coming year, which is why I was hoping that tonight we could have our conversation, but we'll do that on the August 8th and we'll you know, adapt and adjust to the board's changes. But it's a great district to be a part of, and I'm fortunate to be a small part of it. I really am. A lot of really cool things going on here. So I just scratched the surface of all the cool things.
Well, it's really helpful that Kristen writes, at least once a week about wonderful things going on in the district. And then, just today, you were talking about how the transportation department is training for the entire region and
Yes.
even putting a bus upside down to teach everybody how to get out.
Nice.
So the actual bus accident did take place last year on the snows of Mount Ashland, and so
Mhm.
we got hit by a semi truck. So we've got a really useful bus to
Yeah.
turn upside down.
Yep.
And do all kinds of evacuation drills with and all kinds of
Wow.
cool things.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Now you get to train everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So Haley's group paid us for that.
Oh my God.
Pays.
What are a couple of challenges that the district is facing?
Well, one that this board wouldn't know about too much is that we have an archaic system for financial system that we're redoing, which is gonna take a lot of work. We still have the green screen, the AS400, which is from the 1980s. And we're moving to the updated Tyler doing it. So that's one of the big things, and that didn't come easy because the former business manager had hired a different company and they didn't deliver, so then we got involved in a lawsuit to get our money back or investment back so we could do this other thing, so.
Yeah.
It's simple things like that that people outside the district wouldn't know, right, but are important things.
Yeah.
To those of us in the district.
Right.
I think one of the challenges that I hear, and I certainly support taking action on, and that's the issue of COVID. How students got so far behind because Oregon was one of the first to remove kids from school and one of the last to put them back into school. And I think it just impacted kids so terribly. You could predict that before it even happened. I remember looking at my wife and said, "This is going to be a disaster." The minute it happened, as a school person myself, and it's clear that the kids are behind, especially in the elementary level. When you look at kindergarten, it's basically kindergarten. You basically missed 3 years of school. When you start in the third grade as a kindergartner, the social challenges along with the academic challenges are so difficult to overcome. Are going to be so difficult to overcome, and at every level, it's going to be. At that level, it's going to be the worst, in my opinion. And I think finding the way to catch those kids up is just huge. Huge. And it's going to impact us for decades.
I think a kid in middle school when the pandemic hit was more adversely affected than in elementary.
Really?
Because we just don't have the runway to get them caught up,
Yeah,
right? I mean.
Yeah.
They all suffered emotionally, and
Yeah.
they all suffered
Yeah.
that harm of not being connected, but if I was an 8th grader and I lost that year and a half, I don't have the runway to. As a school district to get that year and a half closed.
Yeah.
If I was a 2nd grader, it's still emotionally. Debilitating.
Yeah.
But at least we have more time to close the gap before we send them on. But all of it was exceedingly difficult, and I will. Speaking for myself, I'll say, and I think I echoed the words of the view of my wife. We were told as school personnel that what we did really just wasn't that important. That it could just be done on a computer, send the kids home.
Yeah.
And what we all found out was what the work we do is critically important.
absolutely.
And to be told it wasn't was really painful.
Yeah.
So it's a hurt that I'm not gonna get over. And I told Governor Brown that, not actually to her face, but in a Zoom box.
Well, teachers, it
Probably
needs to be
afraid of
reiterated, teachers over and over again, how important their role is in the academic and social development of young people. It cannot be done without their presence.
But remember, Japan was playing with artificial intelligence and robots in the classroom about 2010, and we're all
Yeah.
superfluous, and
Yeah.
human connection isn't superfluous.
That's huge.
Yeah. So,
I think the difference between the cohorts Joe's talking about, the cohort you're talking about is. It didn't impact 100% of the 8th graders. It impacted part of it. But it impacted 100% of kindergarten kids. They can't get on. Computer.
It runs across the board.
Along similar lines, unless you want to move on.
No, go ahead.
I think trying to represent the values and the concerns of this community while interacting with the state is one of the huge challenges we have going forward. And then similar to COVID, behavioral issues in classrooms. And a lot of those come out of what Joe's talking about, as well as the middle school kids that spend way too much time on computers. Heaven knows what all they found on there too, but yeah, those are some challenges we have to move forward. I think there's a good team in place to work on those things for sure, along the lines of what Dustin was mentioning. Tim, the team you put together as well, but There's some big stuff to do.
It's hard when liberal Salem is dictating to conservative rural Oregon. And the stresses and pressure that that puts on communities.
Right.
Um,
Mhm. Sure.
I'm gonna add one more since I've actually written an article on this. And the third one is the issue with enrollment. And that's sort of new to me because public's not new to me that I didn't know about it, new to me and that I'm working in this world where funding is based on enrollment. A great deal of your funding is based on enrollment. And that's another thing. COVID has had an impact on that, but so have the values that Chad's talking about as well, and that is this potential move towards independent school. Even though I worked in independent schools, I support public schools 100% of the product of a public school, and I have family that works in public schools. But there's now so much more pressure, internal pressure within families to do the right thing for how they perceive as the right thing for their children. That might be homeschooling, independent schools, private schools, religious schools. I mean, there's a new school starting in this community right now that's going to draw. There's no question it'll draw. So Tim is going to have to, and the whole staff is going to have to market in some form or fashion to ensure that the enrollment either stays the same or grows so that funding doesn't get impacted by that. And that's statewide movement for school choice right now is on full burn. It's not a small thing going on. It's a big deal going on right now. And that could really impact public schools in a negative way from a financial standpoint.
Maybe back to the stress that Tim was talking about. Values Chad was mentioning. So much of what comes out of Salem by the time it gets to us after legislation through the kind of stuff. It's almost like despair. They're trying to deal with the bad outcomes they've seen. So they try to identify those people. And then they try to say, we're trying to help you because you're screwed up. As opposed to having all the students have hope that their future is going to be bright, that kind of thing. And we actually went to an OSBA annual convention, had a speaker there who was comparing students from around the world. And the other students, I guess I call it their hope level, was pretty mediocre. The United States, even though their test scores were abysmal compared to the other student, they all thought they were going to be astronauts, CEOs, and rich. Right? The hope quotient of the American kids is always way higher than kids elsewhere in the world. And so a little bit, some of the struggle that I see coming out of Salem, they're trying to be helpful, but they're negative instead of being positive and giving the kids hope, which I think translates into mental health issues for the kids, but looking internally and trying to say what's wrong with you instead of looking outward, seeing the opportunities, what's good, and what's hopeful about their future. So I find that a struggle with what comes out of state.
Well, and I see major trust issues going on. I read one story about how the writer was talking about, America has always had trust issues with government from the 1700s on. But now it's like we've always kind of joked about the people in Salem with their little white lab coats and going through the data and stuff, but it's never really, the trust issues have never percolated down to the local level that they have now. People don't automatically trust the district. And I talked about unity earlier, and I think that's part of it, seeing a divided board makes people less trustful of the entire system. If they can't, if 7 people can't come to terms with something, how's a whole community gonna come to terms with something? That's why I stress that as much as I do. I've seen that deterioration, and then the kids are kind of caught up in, you know, some cultures, you talk about culture of the board, some cultures around the world have an emphasis on education, and this is the #1 thing you do, and you're going to do your homework before you do anything else. When you have less support of that kind of culture, and then things go wrong, it's so much easier as a teenager to just give up. You know, if you come up to a major roadblock or you fail a class and it's like, I'm not gonna make it, I'm just gonna quit kind of attitude. And there again, the hope is what we need to foster. You know, that workshop that, you know, love is first. The kids need love, and it's not anything having to do with having them on their arrival at school. It's the respect and ability to listen to their problems and help them move through them, whether that's on an individual educational plan or but they need a competent, caring adult in their life. And sometimes that's a coach or a teacher or even a janitor or a cafeteria worker that or a bus driver that is aware of them as a person.
Right. Yeah.
So that they feel at least some support in them as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. There's research that shows that that a student being known by one caring adult at school, no matter who it is more likely to graduate.
Yeah, even the custodian.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move us on but a couple of the themes that you talked about are going to come up. I'm going to give you a scenario. We're going to talk through this. In fact, just one of the themes that you talked about is going to come up here. During a recent board meeting, a board member rejected the proposed vision statement because it included the phrase "all means all." They indicated that it was impossible for each student to achieve at a high level. Many students do not have the support at home necessary for them to be successful, said the board member. It is an impossible goal and should not be approved by the board. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, so 100% graduation and 100% third grade.
Oh, no, state of Oregon, 40-40-20.
40-40.
100%.
No. So where does it, how do you, that is the question, how do you work through that line of, we want everyone to graduate, versus looking at the reality of it's going to take a miracle for this life skills student to graduate on the same level as a regular graduate. There are some seemingly impossible goals, but we do want every child to have opportunities at whatever level they are at to be able to move forward. And maybe their definition of success is different, but we want to be just as supportive and caring for all students. And we all have wishes and dreams and hopes for every child, all meaning all. But there are some realities that are tough to deal with.
Sure.
I want to, if I can respond to this, all means all is an aspiration.
Yes.
And I think having high aspirations, #1, is a wonderful thing. It doesn't mean that everybody is going to be at the same level. It just means everybody's going to achieve at a high level. And that high level, because public schools deal with such a broad range of folks. I mean, I'll give you an anecdote. I worked with the developmentally disabled for 2 years. And I remember there was this little girl, she was probably 14 years old. She was 117 pounds and considered obese because she never moved in her life. All she did was just lay. That's all she did. Now, what kind of aspiration can you have for a child like that? Dennis Vogan, who was my partner that worked in this area, we said, we're gonna make that child smile. One day she's gonna smile, and that'll make her life have meaning. We put her on a waterbed after about 6 months, and we just got on the end of the waterbed. Okay. And as we started moving that waterbed, she broke out in a smile. Okay, she achieved at a high level. Because that's the highest level she was capable of achieving at. She was maybe the mental development of a 2-day-old. Okay. So it's the same thing at not as extreme a level, but it's how you define high level achievement for the individual kid. So I wouldn't have a bit of a problem with that, all things all.
So the only problem with it would become if the goal got tied to the superintendent's monetary pay, at which point, then it's probably not fair to have that.
There might be concerns expressed.
That's fair, that's fair. And this is why I appreciate your articulation of this being aspirational. Because it is aspirational. In fact, I was just with your neighbor this morning, Three Rivers, and we were talking about this being a vision statement. This is a vision statement, and vision statements are aspirational. And what I want to point out to you in this is that there is a piece of research there that says that the single belief shared by all board members that all students can learn, just learn, that all students can and will learn, shared by all board members, measurably impacts student achievement. That is just learn. That is talking about, like Joe said, at meeting them where they are at their level. And so that sounds like sure, duh, something, but you think of the opposite. If there are, those on the board that just don't believe that all kids can learn, then that impacts how you make decisions, right? It impacts how you want to allocate resources, it impacts how you want to do professional development, it impacts how you want to adopt policy. But if everyone believes that all kids can learn, that impacts how you make decisions. And so having the aspiration that we're here for all kids at their level, they can all learn. That has a positive impact on student outcomes. Just that belief in and of itself.
What's the Carol Dweck book on, not yet? Maybe a student hasn't been successful, but it's not a total forever failure. It's something that they need to work on. Because they're going to be able to do that later.
Right.
And not giving up on a kid. I can remember a teacher saying, you can just about tell in kindergarten which kids are going to end up in jail. And so are you going to allocate resources for some kid that
Right.
is just going to end up in jail?
Right.
Versus this kid is here, he's not where some of the other children are yet.
Right.
But believing that there is going to be a yet.
Yes, right. Instead of forming an expectation for them that early.
Yeah.
And determining how you're going to interact with that student based on
If you
potentially a negative belief.
give up on them, if you give up on
Mhm.
the key
Mhm.
versus we keep going,
Mhm.
and we've got to
Double
teach our
down
kids.
math student. So that they can read it 100%, they're great.
So. This is a huge mouthful, but I want to just go over what the underpinning of all of this is about collaborative governance. And I don't come to you with, this is what Kristen thinks about board training. This is what OSBA thinks. All of our stuff is that we bring to you is steeped in what the research says how boards impact student governance or student governance, student achievement. And it is really founded in collaborative governance. So this is about forming effective partnerships with each other, with your superintendent, building that environment of trust and respect, and having collective responsibility, accountability, and support. And that is, again, with each other, with your superintendent, with his team, and with your community. So what I want to do is talk.
Growth mindset.
Yeah. Oh, okay, okay, got it. What I want to do is go through a little bit of what these roles are. What this is, and again, you don't have to digest this, but prior to about 30, 25 years ago, there was this belief that boards just sort of sat on top of the system and didn't really matter much. That, it was just the superintendent on forward that made a difference. Now, superintendent on forward makes a huge difference. We know that the research says that teachers in the classroom have the most impact on student learning, as you would expect. But there was an assumption that boards they were just sort of out there doing their thing. They didn't really impact student learning. And there was a study called the Lighthouse Project that really asked the essential question, do boards matter? Do they make a difference? And what the research showed was actually, yes, boards make a difference. And so then there was a bunch of research after that, and that kept confirming that boards make a difference. And so what I want to do is go through what these standards are. That if you work toward these things, now what I'm gonna not do is set you up for failure. Because what I don't want to do is say, you have to do all these things perfectly. And if you do them perfectly, then that's how you impact student learning. What you do is work toward these things. And when you work toward these things and keep these things in mind, this is how you impact positively student learning. And so this is developed by a researcher named Tom Alsbury, who is a researcher who has devoted his entire career to researching boards and then their interaction with superintendents. And so these are 12 practice-based standards that this is the kind of stuff you work toward. These are your roles. And the first one, which really underscores everything, is vision-directed planning. It's that, what do you want for your students? You work on that. This is one of the most important things the board does, is set that vision and direction for your kids and for your district. What is it that you want for your kids? When they leave, grants pass, what do you want for them? And you work on that with your community input. You work on that with your superintendent. That is not just board in isolation, but how do you engage your constituency in coming up with a vision for the district, the strategic priorities that come underneath that? How do you do that? What is the process for doing that? But doing that is the important thing. Then community engagement. This looks different in every single district. What does it mean to engage your community here? That changes over time, depending on what's going on in your community, depending on who moves in and out of your community, depending on how your community changes. Or things that you learn about how to engage your community, but continuing to be engaged with your community and how to get that kind of feedback, knowing that your community is not just community at large, but community partnerships and businesses and staff and students and families, they're all part of your community. Your effective leadership, it is part of that establishing focus, directions, and those expectations. That last part that says align authority and responsibility so decisions can be made at the most local level is empowering your superintendent to do his job. So this is about not getting into the weeds. You do governance and your superintendent does management, right? So you are at that 30,000 foot level where you're adopting the budget, you're adopting policy, you're adopting program, you're being informed, obviously, about what the district is doing. And your superintendent gets to manage the district, gets to do the daily dealings of the district. Now, what I say is, it's not that you don't get to do that. You don't have to do that. You don't want to do that. You want to hire somebody who's in charge of all of that stuff. And that's what you do when you hire a superintendent. Accountability is having those high expectations, holding the district accountable for reaching those results. What does that mean? So a lot of times, I will engage with districts in strategic planning. And I'll come in and there will have been like a previous strategic plan. And it will be like, you know, how far did you get on this? And it won't have been measurable. Like one of the pillars of a strategic plan is commonly community engagement. And there will have been nothing measurable about that pillar. Like the community will be engaged, will be like the main thing. Well, how was this measured? There wasn't anything measurable. And so one of the essential components of the accountability piece is monitoring how those things are going. So at what point during the year for each of the strategic priorities that you're going to set, are you going to get information from your superintendent and his team about how progress is being made on those strategic priorities? When do you get that information? What kind of information is it? When is the appropriate period of time to check in? You collaborate with your superintendent for, you know, how and when you get that information, but monitoring that so that if things are going really well, you get an update on that. If there needs to be some course correction, then that happens then. There may be budget implications, there may be policy implications, something that you have something to do with, but that you're continuously monitoring at appropriate intervals what that looks like. Using data for continuous improvement is another role. So what are the kinds of data that you use from multiple sources? So when you're assessing progress in the district, what are you using to assess progress? So I'm guessing that in this district, if we're talking about student achievement, it is not all about SBAC here. It's not all about the state test, right? Like you measure progress in different ways here as well. And do you know do you as a board know what kinds of measurements, like what kinds of assessments are used? You know what those things measure. And so, you know, and data is not just about academic achievement. There's financial data, there are other kinds of data. Using multiple sources of data and information to assess progress on what your strategic priorities are. Cultural responsiveness is that you have diversity in many facets. Your job is to reduce and eliminate barriers for all students. So all students feel like they belong in your district. There aren't barriers to access to your programs. Bringing your perspective, multiple perspectives to program approvals, to the district, to policy, that's important. Culture and climate is about you creating a climate of expectations that all students can learn. Going back to that all students can learn piece. Supporting processes that foster a safe and positive learning environment for kids. And then also modeling professional and respectful behavior. I always say to boards, like, you know, you model the way. I think Tim was saying this earlier. You model the way for the rest of the district. You model the way in the community as well. And so even when you disagree, doing so with respect, doing so in a positive way. You can disagree in a positive way. And so modeling those respectful relationships is really important. Being a learning organization, you're reflecting, you're making improvements, you're looking for success at all levels. You're doing professional development for yourself, encouraging that with your superintendent, encouraging that with teachers. That's a really great process to go through. That can be a really positive process. Looking at continuous improvement as just being lifelong learners. We expect that from our kids. We expect that from teachers, doing that as board members as well. Like we never stop learning. There's always something new to learn. Even when we've been on the board for many, many years, there's continuous learning that keeps going, and expecting that out of the organization is a role that can impact kids. And the last four, and then I'll give you a break, is systems thinking. So looking at the whole district as one system. Part of that is not taking a problem over here and just moving it over here, but looking at your system as one holistic system. It is also about leveraging resources, partnering with community partners, partnering with other districts. If you've got resources in other districts, or just general knowledge that you can use. Hey, what have you done about this? What have you done about that? At the state level, if possible, That says coordinated programs, resource models, that kind of thing, but looking at your district as a shared system. Innovation and creativity is a really fun one because you get to think about solving problems in a different way. And I will say that the best example that I know of that is a common shared example is that nobody did things the same when we were in comprehensive distance learning. When schools had to shut down for COVID, like everybody had to do things differently. Governance looked different, schools looked different. Everybody had to think about problems in a different way. So no matter how you felt about it, everybody had to be innovative during that time. And so what are the lessons about thinking that you took from that can be applied to thinking about problems in a different way? Now, if you are an award-winning district that has all kinds of good stuff going on, you are likely doing a lot of innovative and creative thinking. And so how does that translate at the board level? Like, what's the board's role in some of that stuff? Maybe you're being creative with your budget or being innovative in some way that contributes to that, to the success of your district. The next one, board member conduct, ethics, and relationship with the superintendent. This is about knowing where your governance role ends and where your superintendent's role begins. When we do some scenarios, we're going to talk about a lot about where the details are there, but having an understanding of those things and then being fiscally responsible to the extent that you can, aligning your budget to your strategic goals. And of course, ensuring that your district is financially sound, knowing what that looks like, knowing how to read your budget, and being good stewards of public funds. Any questions on any of that? What thoughts? Here.
So does OSBA rank the various school boards in the state?
We do not.
Why not?
We are not in the business of telling the state who's the best.
Who's the worst?
Or who's the worst. Absolutely not.
Why? You don't want improvement?
Of course, we want improvement, but we work with each district individually with what you want for your own improvement. Like, what is it that you think? Plus, we are not involved closely enough with each district to be able to say, here's what you need. Like, if I worked with you on a monthly basis or some really concentrated period of time, I could probably do that. But we don't have enough experience with each individual board to be able to do that.
And yet Salem every year thinks they have that knowledge.
We're not a regulatory body. We don't have to. But I encourage you all to, to think about this. And in fact, I'm going to ask you to do a little activity next, but do you all want a break?
Couple minutes.
Yeah, a couple minutes.
Yeah.
How long would you like? Just 5, maybe?
Yeah.
10 to 3? Back? 5 minutes?
4.
You don't need any water?
Yeah.
He's saying signals to stop.
Oh, no, but I want to make sure that you all have a break.
Move all day long.
Want to make sure everybody has a break.
Saying 10 till, go back at 10 till.
Yeah.
Cause you're Mr. Good. Jim. Check in on my son.
Come on, you have to do that.
I do not.
Don't try too hard.
Well, we don't work with everybody. We don't work with
Great, my oldest
everybody.
one's trying to- Hey, this happens.
Get rid of the pool and you don't work.
You know, these.
What are you trying to get out of me?
Remember the
Meeting here.
For achieving their young kids.
So
in particular,
what I
and to
did
get them to sit and listen to you for a minute.
is say,
Those
here are
15
some exemplary districts that likely that
22
How
It's
to
the
the
same
extent
thing.
that
They
we
don't do
have-
well after about 5 minutes. You gotta
do these.
move. You gotta do something different.
What I would not
Engage.
say is, here are some districts who are our members that do things really badly.
I get you're not gonna do that.
So if a district asks for a rating,
There's no way to rate. Now, if a district said, we need.
based upon your,
Got something.
If-
going on.
If a district said to me.
I just
"We
want to know the
really
two
think-"
factions or three factions. What are they? Three. You gotta expand on this stuff, man. It's always, he's. He asks questions, but they come out in statements. The opinion is like right behind it, somewhere in there. Just gotta get what it is. What do you say?
I'm used to Gary's questions.
Yeah. Hey, I have a little, something that came to mind when you had that first little all the beans all,
Yeah.
topic. There's people that may disagree with me about this, but an example in our community
Mhm.
that came to mind with that is our local like youth soccer organization, which is called OFA. And my kids have had years of like, I would call it toxic experiences in what should be a very positive
Sure.
youth soccer program. And what I've realized it boils down to is because of, you know, powers that be and thought process, I guess, for competitive minded folks, they've decided that even at a young age, say we have enough in that age group for 2 teams for Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
They've decided they're gonna put all the best kids on team A,
Mhm.
and then everybody else on team B.
Yeah.
And you know. Some people might think, well, what we're trying to do is get the kid, and then
What's that?
they'll go to the next level.
Like this for
You know,
those
we're gonna-
times in your.
They're all gonna get better together and, you know, because they're more competitive and then. You know, there'll be the farm league for Grants Pass High School eventually, and that's where we're gonna get the best, you know, soccer kids.
Right.
But what happens is it creates this like loser game.
I'm sorry,
And
Tim, I
you lose
didn't
other
know.
games, and the teams that beat us, they start becoming cocky, and then the parents are getting upset. The whole thing just like melts down. And yeah, it was very clear to me, and it goes back to the thought process of like, you're saying at a young age that this kid will never, you know, progress, and you're building in this like philosophy that basically is like dousing their hope, you know, of becoming a better soccer player. And then we even heard stories like, and I would firmly believe that if you were, you know, old school mix up the teams where it's just like schoolyard, like, hey, let's have a game. Okay. Chad's coach A and Joe's coach B, and you get the first pick, you get the second pick, and the kids get all divvied up. That's actually going to create a better environment for learning for all the kids. Even if you're the most competitive kid on the team, you're the best athlete or whatever. Well, now you have to deal with, okay, you don't have like this stacked all-star team. How are you going to win? And how are you going to be a leader? You know, and then maybe the kid that's like the least athletic. Well, he now
Chocolate.
gets to like be around other athletes and learn and see, you know, what it could look like to be a better athlete and work harder and all that. So
Oh.
anyway, that was just an example that came to mind because it was
The water-
like such a negative experience, and I've definitely voiced my
The
opinion.
one
with them.
that
They haven't
we
changed.
got
And
from
what you have
manufacturing.
there, flash.
That blue one that you always have.
This is just
Well,
an
one was my
enjoyable
Yeah.
activity for kids to have. The other one,
Where
which
should you
is,
keep our
we're
binders?
trying to develop this
Oh,
reading
yeah.
theme.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I've seen it.
And those two worldviews
Yeah.
approach what they want to do very differently.
My thing though is I still would disagree that if you were trying to build the best kids,
I
that
get
that
that.
putting
I'm
all of
just
them on an
talking
all-star
about the-
team isn't the best way to do that.
But
That you would
the
still,
mindset.
you would not only develop them better by putting them on mixed teams, you would also get surprised by the kid who trips over himself every day, you know, in 6th grade, but works so hard that now he's one of the best athletes because he stayed in and he didn't get like his hopes dashed because he lost every game and he was on this like loser team, you know?
or Gary would say you should double down on that kid.
Yeah, I had a,
What you're
wasn't
talking
even a
about
friend in high school.
is outliers.
Yeah, so I had this, here's the story, I had he was actually he lived next door to my best friend, and he was always like the third wheel, because I'd go over to my best friend's house, and this like loser kid down the street would like want to play or whatever. And like, he was so uncoordinated, I remember we like threw a ball, or he threw a ball in the air, and then they like, went to catch it, but it hit him in the mouth, and he broke his tooth, and I was just like, this kid doesn't have any coordination. But that kid, he was kind of ADD, he'd get into something and like he'd really go for it. he eventually got into snowboarding and like he'd go and bounce on stuff on his backyard and flips with snowboard and all this kind of stuff. Found out years later, he became a professional snowboarder. Like, he just like
Push them out onto the field.
put his head down
Almost
and
every
for it.
college.
And excel,
Tim,
you know,
what I heard,
and that's my
what
story.
I heard
like,
Joe
his
say,
soccer
interview
players, they
with
aren't good today, and so, you know, oh, let's push them aside.
I think I heard that too.
No, like you gotta, you know, bring them up on the team, but you never know if one of those kids is just gonna.
Or you and
Well,
Joe.
everybody will use soccer.
then there were two.
Then there were two.
Ranked the teams based on total age of the team, and then told them who was gonna win by the end of the year. I was nearly 100% accurate.
Really? Yeah. Just by age?
Yep.
You know, you were talking about the issue of contact with adults. I was a clinician. At university. School side.
But yeah, that's, I mean, this became mine, it's like, we don't want to be other involved, you know, whatever the version of that is happening, or could be happening in the district. Get rid of that, just want to get rid of that. She's talking about, well, who's being cut, right, that sort of thing.
Right.
Still.
You have to change the mindset of the people within the group.
Oh, don't tell Tanya.
Creates that win.
You know how deadly that was before?
So many children feel.
There would be spots everywhere before.
Yeah, and I was gonna tell Tim,
Let's
we were
go
talking
to the light.
sports, but I just assume I'm like, you know, 6'3" athlete.
And so what you.
And I told him my freshman year, I was the second smallest kid on the football team. Bounced out of football after that, where I broke my neck.
It's can.
And didn't actually
Where they
grow
make
until my
passion.
junior year in high school.
That's how my dad was. My
And
dad
I missed all the sports, but when I was in college, I was, I mean,
Yeah.
So where were you age wise?
Like Tanya skipped you on the candy berry, let me help you.
Oh,
Yeah.
the candy berry.
so there's all these factors, right? Like, you
I'm not gonna
can't
touch
just like.
it, I'm not gonna touch it.
No, bring it back, you're not touching it, not yours. Get it. Oh.
No.
Yeah, cruise ship.
And it's-
No, it's not.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
That's what I would. Yeah.
Every night.
Yeah.
And we're-
Wow.
And it's-
Yeah.
that's the cutoff, though.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I love being at January 1.
Today and I was like.
it was a cutoff.
Ancestry to ownerships.
Mhm.
January
It was
1.
good, but I mean.
You know, there are countries in the world, you celebrate your 5th birthday by going to school,
And all.
regardless of when
Yeah.
it starts,
And I can
when your
take that
birthday
kid
is.
who wants to see
That's when you start school. Yeah.
all that I-
You turn 5 today, you gotta go to school. You make it a big deal. What countries? Norway is one. Scandinavian countries do it.
They have a C student.
And
Here, if your birthday is on October
If we
7th,
know.
you got
Your birthday's on-
whole nother year.
Your birthday's on September 8th or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
What's the rules and boards regarding
But that's a challenge.
kids that are held back a year?
Mhm.
So then by the time they're seniors, they're like.
Anonymity.
Yeah.
They're
There's.
allowed to
Who
play
gets
sports.
held back?
OSA. If they can't be
You graduate.
right, but if they've been held back, they're not a graduate, and there's 19 something about.
Hear you say it.
They can be 19,
Been my thing with Jim. She's a dog.
I don't drink chocolate then.
but as long as they haven't graduated.
I have a friend growing up.
Well, thank you.
Held him back.
Gonna have
Whole
chocolates around.
thing that he
Thank you.
typically wasn't as big as the other kid. That was awkward and that sort of thing at a young age. By the time he was in high school, he was this huge kid, you know, and he was older than everybody else. I was like. Weird.
Our youngest son has a July 30th birthday, so just yesterday. And we held him back because he was kind of smallish and we thought that would give him an advantage. And he turned out to be 5'7" and not very interested in athletics at all. So, like, it's kept him in home an extra year longer if he needed that.
Oh, backfired.
Sent his dad off to high school.
There is.
You gotta wait another year to retire.
That's right.
There's,
Can't work at all.
there's research that shows those kids that are held back for reasons like that do better academically.
Yeah, he didn't care about school either.
I do believe.
Of my
there's
4
some
kids, he's the only one who didn't graduate college.
Right.
Yeah.
My point is,
I noticed.
Hey, everybody, don't break those over there.
Best friend.
Oh.
Held him back a year.
Those things have been knocked off the wall more times because they stick out like that.
It's meant to be that way.
Is it?
Okay.
Tanya, you wanna
Drove
kick
my
the
son
door?
around Because he was older, a year older. and he was,
Not bad, 5 minute break, you going on to 12 minutes.
I know.
Pretty good.
That's generally my expectation. Okay. Thank you all for coming back.
Well, they didn't have a choice.
That's true. What I'm gonna do now, and we're gonna, for sake of time, we're not gonna do three. What I would like you to do, since we've got 6 board members here, 3 of you are new, 3 of you are seasoned.
Oh. Season.
Very
With my hair,
careful
that's
with my
all ever.
words.
Seasoning.
I would like you to pair up a new board member with a seasoned board member and just do one. What do you think one of the board's top strengths are, and what do you think one of the board's areas of growth is? And you know, sometimes new board members are like, I don't know, you know, I don't really have much to say about this. I did this exercise, so I will just again model behavior. I was recently in as I mentioned, I'm a brand new board member myself. I was recently in my first board retreat where my colleague from OSBA came and did the training, and I was like, it's day job. But we did this exercise, and my first thought was, I don't have much to say, but I was paired with a more seasoned board member, and I actually did have a lot to say about this, even though I'm new to my board. So we're just gonna take like 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less if you get done, and you can move around the room, whatever. But I would like you to pair up, and we're gonna report out. Just come up with a board strength and a board area of growth, or something you'd like to see the board work on, and what you think the board's good at. So I'll let you all figure out how to pair up and talk for a few minutes.
Cheaters. Me?
I think the board threw out the years of the top strength and we
Let's go be experienced.
decide yourself.
Strength.
We talked about.
Yeah, let's talk about yours.
Oh, you two go right ahead. We'll try to read this email.
What's in those documents?
Yeah, Yeah. I'm like, I haven't read that yet.
So. But that's an area of growth every study that. Sort of rebuild the system, I guess.
Yeah, I know that's your thing. He shared our. Most everybody shared. Everybody had that doing it. I think our kids. Yeah. Obviously, it's the fact that we're here. Downsides is a lot of liability and. Planes and emails. So there's a lot of stuff out here. Things were. So. And so far, the board, I'm just kind of rambling, like the whole. So far, the board. You know, yeah, I have an opinion here or have a question here, or I don't think anybody is shy.
Well, that's important. That's the first step. And I think it was the process and read together and, you know, so that's really. Those are biggies.
Yeah. We're chatting.
The
Trusting.
Holiday Express.
Around it. And we had like a coach and we're all talking about, I've been part of the teams.
Did Three Rivers have the drum line going for you?
They did not.
And I just remember like our.
It's the first day.
The president.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Just like almost coming. everything
Maybe it
up,
was
like,
too early in
y'all
the
got
morning.
there, okay, good, move on to the next thing, you know, it's like, kind of just this.
So our music program,
I remember looking.
our
around,
band,
Mhm.
Well,
and won the marching band.
This guy
and
over
won
here like said this.
the drum line,
I don't
came
think that-
third and
There was a
trombone.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
Really
good.
feel like there was
But-
a trust, you know.
where your heart is, that's where you put your treasure.
It made me
Yeah.
think a lot like how
A
people
lot of money
trust
on
you.
music.
Oh, I bet.
You don't have a lot of trust from somebody,
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
or you also just, you know, disagree with them about things, or they've done something in the past, or like. Regret, you know.
Couple
So
more minutes.
it's important, but it's also really like. It's like.
So, and you also role at ODE,
It's easy. to
Yeah.
lose, you know.
chief of staff.
I think so, yeah.
That's new to the ODE, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah, I
Okay,
believe
I've been
that's a
trying
new
to figure,
position.
she didn't replace Scott Nine.
No,
I need to trust.
No, what is his actual title?
He's one of the
Right, he's
assistant superintendents in charge of,
right, in terms of something, something.
yeah, academics and.
Yeah, I
education.
know, I think that's a new title altogether. isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's as far as I know.
Okay,
Yeah.
so who's gonna take over SPED? Any idea?
I don't know,
But it also hasn't.
haven't heard.
There's no foundation.
But I have some people in SPED who were very fond of Tennille Art,
Uh-huh.
very nervous about it.
Uh-huh.
So.
Okay, why don't we finish our thought and come back? Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna ask each group just to name the strength you found and an area of growth that you talked about. I'll start here. Dustin and Devin. What'd you talk
Good choice. She has been the reporter for the board.
Well, so I think for every board that I've been on, you know, the top thing of growth for me or for strength for me is the knowledge that everybody on the board wants what's best for kids,
Mhm.
you know, regardless of what they think needs to be done or has been done, they want the movement forward to be what's best for kids.
Mhm.
And then they're passionate about that, passionate enough to spend time, energy, and resources to be here.
Yeah.
And once they get here, I think, you know, this kind of goes into what's the top 3 areas of growth. Well, for me, it's about trust. You
Mhm.
know, trusting administration, the processes, and the people to be open and honest and not shy about expressing what they're thinking. So that we know what's on the table to move forward and with.
Mhm. Great. Cassie, who's your spokesperson?
How do I do?
Did good, yeah. I concur.
Similar answers as far as the strengths.
Mhm.
I would add to the caring for kids and caring for our community. That I personally see a lot of visionaries in the room.
Mm.
I think that's really important for the group that's maybe responsible for casting vision. There's some smart individuals in there, so. Those are
He looked
strengths.
at Gary when he said that, by the way.
It's actually,
For the record.
I was looking at Danny, but I couldn't get past it. Areas for growth, we need to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like 3 years from now, get to know each other. Like, that's gonna be an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Decisions need to be made quickly in the very near future, not a long time from now, but I just think people need to get trust in each other, as you mentioned, Debbie, but. Just feel more comfortable with those that are in the room.
Great. Gary and Joe.
Yeah, I've got it written down, so I'm gonna Good. It's okay with Gary. You okay with that, Gary? You're good with that, okay? I think strengths, again, pretty similar. Passion for young people, in fact, passion for making a difference in the community. I think another strength that we came up with was. Gary said in the past, the board was primarily made up of Grants Pass High School graduates. It seems to be a lot more of that. And actually, we bring a broader perspective by diversifying out and bringing folks in who aren't necessarily from that same experience. In terms of areas of growth, that's the idea that we need to build a sense of camaraderie, and I think I agree with that right now. We agree with that. That needs to be done very quickly. The other thing that's an area for growth is how do we share what we do with the community appropriately? How do we go out there and make that happen so that the community has trust and belief in what we're doing? Because the factions in this community are pretty separate.
They're not trusting. They don't trust. Even though we try to tell them. It's gonna be okay.
Thank you all for sharing those. What I would say is, you know, if you go to set goals for yourselves at some point that are different than overarching district goals, use your strengths to capitalize on the areas of growth that you want to achieve. So, you know, I heard a common theme in there that you're all here because you've got a passion for kids to learn and do their best. So there's, first of all, you all talked about, you know, getting to know each other and building that sense of camaraderie. You all said that you're here for the same reason, essentially. And so building that trust that even if you disagree at some point, that there's, you know, a positive assumption that you are all here for the same reason. Utilizing that strength as you build goals for yourself, capitalizing on that strength as you build goals, which I would encourage you to do, it would be a really good thing. So remember that as you go forward, if you choose to say, hey, as a board, we need to build goals for ourselves and our own professional development and our own improvement plan. That kind of. Thank you for sharing that.
I hear bungee jumping on Tuesday. Team building.
Great, trust falls, things like that.
Leadership
Question.
rapport.
Of course.
And I'd ask this of Debbie and Cassie and Gary. Has there ever been a system of board assessment?
Yes, we.
Okay.
Yes, we've done it twice now.
Yep.
Oh, wait. What was the score?
You were number one in the state, Gary.
Number one,
Gary, you're number one.
that's right.
But you can't do anything of yourself, so.
Turns out we're bringing your average down.
So we're gonna run
Gary,
through
you talked
some.
about more than almost any board member in the state of Oregon.
I love this. I love it. I love working with you all.
Mayor and Michelle be through.
So we're gonna run through some scenarios, and embedded in those scenarios are some technical things that every board should know and some other kinds of things that boards should know. So I'm gonna run you through these scenarios and I'm gonna ask you to talk about them. So a board member posts a question. I remember this is a board member. Posts a question on Facebook asking for input on the high school math teacher's behavior actions. She states that her daughter is upset because of the way the teacher runs her classroom and wants to know if others are having the same concern. She makes herself available for questions by text, email, and social media. She goes to the superintendent and shows them the concerns, wanting something to change immediately. She also emails other board members for their input. She tells the superintendent that if they do not deal with it, she will bring it up at the next board meeting. I will tell you, these scenarios come from somewhere. They don't come from nowhere. So what are your thoughts? There's a lot of layers here.
No.
What are your thoughts? Cassie's thoughts are no.
No.
Wait.
Yeah.
First problem, that board member didn't know which hat they were wearing when they were doing stuff.
Yep.
Principles of good practice would call that a conflict of interest.
Okay.
And they should need to just stay away from that.
Failing to take off one hat, putting it on, having a conflict there. Yep. What
trying to
else?
make decisions outside of the meeting, and you always something of concern with the superintendent first.
Mhm.
You don't go outside of that realm.
Okay.
Immediately.
Right.
Not gonna do it.
Right, right. Yep.
In public complaint procedure, KLAR, probably should have gone to the teacher first.
As a parent.
As a parent, as a parent.
You get two hats.
But
You
you
do.
can force
I tried when I first
But
came to get a double
board
billed
member
one. I haven't been able
having
to
the
find it.
complaint as a parent. Right?
Mhm.
Right, which means you do follow policy KL and the AR associated with that, right? You get to follow the same process as everybody else. Yeah, excellent reference to policy. Do
Wear
extra
your
points.
parent hat
Mhm.
and realize that even though you've got your parent hat on, the teacher is going to feel threatened.
It's hard to, yep, once you become a public official, it's your job to say,
Mhm.
I'm here as a parent. Now, are you ever just gonna be seen as a family member, parent, community member? No, no. But it's your job to follow the same process as anybody else would. What else is problematic in here?
Facebook.
Social media.
Social media.
Social media is a problem. Why is that problematic?
It's too public. It's everywhere.
Hmm,
Can't control it.
cannot control it.
Perception versus reality.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And it can create bigger issues.
Yep.
Where they may not have
Mhm.
rallied the troops.
You open yourself up to libel and slander and all those contract issues.
Because you're talking about a staff member as well.
So I'm curious.
She had a legal meeting there before she asked for input.
There we go. There's another one. We'll talk about public meeting law in just a second. Go ahead.
So I'm curious if this is posed in a different way, asking for input, not about a specific individual. As a board member, through social media, is it wrong to seek public comment in that way?
Yes. So as an individual board member, you don't
I
want to,
ask because we're talking about how do we involve the community?
right,
There's been several
yeah.
individuals that have
A
asked
coffee house
for
chat is
that.
probably okay, right? Like inviting people to a coffee house.
No.
And I say this without having a Facebook account, period. I'm not in that. but
Sure,
I'm just
so
curious,
sure.
what is acceptable
Right.
Yeah,
as a mode of,
right,
please bring forward your concerns. If it rises to the level of complaint, obviously go down that route, but
right, right.
what is an appropriate way to do that?
I see our veteran board members wanting to answer. What would you say?
Well, because I've always wanted to do bagels with the board.
Mhm.
Or, I mean, opening up, trying to get that input in and how do we make ourselves more attainable to a distrusting community? I don't want to do anything about what I hear. I want to be like here. But we're a party of 7.
Yep.
So doing things as a party of 1.
Is there
isn't-
an electronic way to do that? That people will respond to?
As one person or as
Not
a
as
board?
Chad Dibdall's Facebook account, but as
A board.
some sort of.
As a whole board? So all of that community engagement really should be done as a whole board because as an individual board member, it gets into the realm of. And this is not on purpose. But it is a slippery slope into the realm of solicitation of complaints and investigations.
Mhm.
Because what you're gonna do, unfortunately, and I will say this, I say this to every single board. Nobody knows what a board member does, and neither did you before you got on the board. Because there's a common perception out there that every individual board member has individual authority. And how great that you just got on the board, you can help me solve my problem. And you have to be ready to, to talk about what your role is as an individual board member, in that you don't have any individual authority. And like I still always say is, it's not that you don't get to have individual authority, you don't have to have any, you don't want that individual, like it's too much. And so when the board seeks community engagement, you should do that as a full board. So you can have community listening sessions, or you can do it via Zoom so that folks can, attend. I would not put out something, asking for written comments on Facebook or something, because that is uncontrollable. That can
Could
be,
you put a post could the district put a post that says the board is looking for input, please feel free to email on a subject?
I would say, who's gonna answer the emails? Because when emails go into a void, people feel like they've not been heard.
Mhm.
So that could create a sense of mistrust also, like I just emailed into a void.
So we have bagels with the board.
This is a really good conversation. I'm glad you brought it up
Mhm.
because, and I remember like on the, there was an application for, board member appointment. And I remember bringing up, a recommendation of could there be a technology solution or something like that? That allows the, community, parents specifically, teachers, to provide the board with input. Because I think what we're all maybe, I don't know if everybody, but there's something like there's an issue there.
Mhm.
And I think the positive thing that we're seeking is we want to
Mhm.
hear
Sure.
from the public. The reality is we're all gonna get hair salon type, or be on a walk,
Yeah.
or somebody sends an individual email to Chad. We're gonna get that.
Yeah, you
but
are.
That's a small section.
Right.
So I think there is an opportunity for innovation.
Yeah,
One of those things.
absolutely.
Maybe something to achieve better connection with the community. And it goes both ways with what we were talking about earlier too. Messaging of positive things from the board and then also getting feedback. From the community. So
I'm gonna disagree a little bit with this Kristen.
What?
And, you are elected by the public. You wanna get on Facebook, say stuff, you can do that. Nobody's gonna stop you, it's not illegal. Whether it's wise, it's a different subject. And this particular scenario, they crossed line. But answer to no one but the next election. Your free speech stuff,
Statutes.
but I'm not saying all your free speech would be wise, or that doing that kind of stuff would be wise. But it's not wrong.
It's not illegal.
No, and I'm not saying it's illegal.
The concern I have about having a vehicle by which you invite the community to come in and just say, we're gonna have bagels with the board, or we're gonna have a site where you can give your input, is there's a certain faction, and it's not a small faction, that are just gonna want to find something. They
Mhm.
just want to find something to complain about.
Mhm.
And they enjoy doing it. And you're gonna be soliciting information that may not be accurate. It may just be
Let's
somebody
stir the
just
pot this
wanting to
way.
be involved. I like the approach, and it gets back to the accreditation thing in some ways, when I was talking about accreditation this morning, or the accreditation process here. Personally, I like the approach of focus groups. And if you want to get input from the community, what you do is you create a focus group. You ask if there's 10 people that would like to come in and share their thoughts. And they sit with the board and say, this is what the community is worrying, or 20 people or whatever. And you do that on an annual basis, or you do something like that, where you don't just open it up to the entire community. But the community is aware that there are these focus groups, and they can become part of it if they want to be part of the focus group. And you do it on a scheduled time. And it's not all year long.
Trish,
That's how we did. the
we do,
superintendent search.
right? We have things that are in place.
Mhm.
Give me some.
Yeah, we have, We-
The community walk through things, we have timed meetings that are scheduled.
we have our parent advisory council where we have representatives.
But I mean, focusing with the board, focus group that can come and meet with the board and share their opinions and thoughts. It might be the parent advisor group, it might be some other group, but you don't want to handpick the people who are already the big supporters. You want a representative group of those who are happy and those who are unhappy. You want an accurate assessment of what's going on. But if you turn it into just, in my opinion, if you turn it into just a free-for-all, and then you find yourself not really doing anything about it because you got 5,000 people that want something different and you can't answer every one of them. We're a focus group, you can narrow it down to 3 things, 2 things, 5 things that need to be addressed.
During our community engagement activities for the integrated plan, we did a lot of focus groups.
Yeah.
Special ed parent focus group, EL parent focus group, lots of different subpopulations. We sent out a number of surveys, and we have a number of climate and culture kinds of things that give you input and ideas about what's going
Yeah,
on.
but what I'm getting at, Trish, I
Yeah.
think that it's letting them sit with board members, so the community knows they're actually sitting with the board members. So there might be a focus group that talks about climate and culture. There might be a focus of parents, of
Yeah.
families.
Mhm.
There might be a focus group that talks about extracurricular involvement. There might be a focus group that talks about academic preparation. Maybe whatever the 2 or 3 hot issues seem to be, you have a focus group that can meet and discuss it. I just get real nervous about the whole idea of just an open wide, they can get way out of hand.
I agree with you on that, but I also think that there's just something, and I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
About, even just the perception, people like to feel heard, and there's, a need for, trust, like with the community and the board. So however we can try to just make sure that there is that welcome, feeling for, whether it's feedback or sometimes like you're talking about people complaints.
That's what I mean by-
They just want to feel heard half the time, right?
This is what I mean about the focus group, though, is the focus group is known. And these families can say, this is something we're concerned about, to the focus group.
Mhm.
And that focus group brings it to them and says, these are the kind of things that are going on with regards to that specific topic. I'm just
Yeah.
throwing that
I
out.
didn't mean to get us off
Yeah.
track on.
No, I mean, this.
No,
If there's something there, yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I think. Go ahead.
Well, so I'm on Facebook and I get, periodic releases from Kristen, the communications person. And I always like and share. And I have not counted the number of people who have said to me, I really like all the information you're giving me regarding the district. And so maybe if and every school seems to have some kind of survey every year for the parents. And if Kristen, told us when those surveys were out, and be sure and fill this out and return by that kind of information, I'd pass it along. If we wanted to do something out of that community of people, parents are just one subset of our broad community of supporters. That might be an avenue to say, here's a survey, return it to the district office, don't return it to me, but that might be an outreach vehicle we might explore.
I think what I hear, Joe's comments, you don't want survey bias.
Well, a survey,
Depending-
you at least narrow it down to a subject.
Right, depending on how you solicit advice, you can actually get the answer you want Because of the way what do they call them, push polls, something. What the district really wants is a statistical accurate input of the attitudes that are out there. And to do that, you can't just like have a meeting and invite people, because you're gonna get a self-selected set for the community
And I
And it
feel
won't
like,
be a very big,
to
Right.
no,
actually get a statistically accurate one. You have to like go through the total list of population or community, randomly pick them, and then you force yourself on them. Get
right,
the opinion out of them.
and
But-
we have to define what community we're really trying to get information from.
well,
But you understand
I
the
do.
difference between random ways of gathering
Yes.
information and an accurate picture of what's out there.
Correct.
right. And I think that building trust with our community, right? We all know, and we're not unique in Oregon or in all that education and the public have had a breakdown when it comes to trust, maybe because we sent their kids home for a while. Maybe because there's other ideas of what needs to be taught and doesn't, or how, but I think when I say bagels with the board, yes, it incites concern because there's a lot of people that could show up, but I want the perception of what we think Grants Pass School District is, or any school district. Tell me, what do you want to know? What are you afraid of? Do you think we're doing this? Trish, answer. Can you answer? I mean, so I'm just the facilitator at that point, even when people come to me. And say, I hear this, and I'm like, well, actually, you should meet Trish. Because when you hear being part of the district that we maybe don't ask our community or we don't want to know, but we're begging our families, and I come from PTA. So I'm like, Winter Carnival, let's go. I'm like, oh, it's the same three of us. Good job, let's do this. They're not coming, they're not populating out. So if there are fears that are creating barriers for people to keep their children from coming to public school, what are they? And let's hear them so we can address them or dispel them. I don't know how to do that. That's what we're
Couple
talking about.
things that I want to point out in this one too are about public meeting law and public records and the interaction with the superintendent, interaction with other board members too, which is tied to public meeting law. And then also calling out teachers by name. So when there is, so you could open yourself up to liability if you're posting or talking anywhere about like, hey, I have a complaint about a teacher and I'm soliciting input for that. There are some, well, if you were to receive a complaint that came all the way up to the system and eventually came to the board and it was about an employee, you would need to give that employee 24 hours notice before you processed a complaint about them. So to be the complainant and to name that teacher and to solicit other complaints about them. I'm not an attorney. I can't interpret law for you. I can tell you what it says. I can't interpret it. So it's not Kristen's opinion or interpretation. But it could be that you could open yourself up to some liability with respect to HR laws there. So you never want to do that. You never want to put yourself in a position to open yourself up to liability. The piece about soliciting information from or opinions from other board members too. Don't forget that like if you're in a group of 4 and you're talking about anything related to board stuff, you've created an illegal public meeting because you've created a quorum. And anytime you're talking about, and the Attorney General's manual is a great place to look at the Attorney General's narrative and interpretation of law here, because they're pretty hard and fast about like, we don't care if it's about board business, like even if it's like, Dustin has an opinion about something and he loops in Debbie to that opinion and Debbie loops in Cassie and Cassie loops in Joe. You've got 4 people now talking And even if it's in a serial fashion, that's what's considered a serial meeting. You want to be really careful about what you're talking about if it is in any relation to board business. Because the Attorney General is like, that's deliberation. We don't care if it's on an agenda or not. We don't care if you're making a decision or not. Like, you've created an illegal public meeting. And so you want to be really careful about how you interact outside of a board meeting. So that you're not talking about board business. Now, you could all, a quorum or more of you could talk about something personal outside of a board meeting. If if a quorum or more of you are friends or something like that, or, have something else to talk about, that's fine. That's not related to board work. The other piece that you want to remember where public meeting law intersects with public records is that anything you put in writing that has to do with your board service is a public record. So, it doesn't mean, like, if you're emailing about something, it doesn't mean that it's always necessary, although it's a very public forum, so it's already out there. But thinking about emails, texts, things like that, it doesn't mean that it's all necessarily disclosable. An attorney would have to determine whether or not, in certain circumstances, if you got a public records request, if everything was disclosable. But just remember that anything you put in writing as part of your board role you're creating public records. This can be a really huge learning curve for brand new board members, because that's a really hard thing to get used to. Wow, everything I put in writing is now public record. And so remember that, because you could get public records requests at some point. OSBA follows this law too. We follow public meeting law, public records requests, that kind of thing. And so, my thinking is, like, I don't put anything in writing that I don't want to see on the front page of the paper, because who knows? And so having something in mind like that is helpful. The other piece of this is skipping all the steps and taking something straight to a board meeting, right? First of all, you're taking personnel issues to a board meeting, which you don't do. But also it's that, as you all identified before, it's that, like, I'm taking my parent hat and I'm using that for personal gain to take to a board meeting. And that's not your role, right? Like, you get to go through the same process as everybody else through that complaint process if you have a complaint. And the goal of that complaint process is to get things solved at the most local level. You hope that complaints don't end up at the board, right? The goal of the complaint process is to get things solved before they come to the board. So hopefully the board is not seeing, a huge amount of complaints. Now, if it does escalate through the process and it gets to the full board, you're still a complainant at that point. But there are, obviously many layers of this that could be problematic for the full board and for that individual board member.
Sorry, our P7 policy, that are policy or contract, one of the two actually says we will not criticize our contract. It's our collective bargaining agreement. Yeah, but our contract with our employees says we will not criticize.
So if boards got together and said we didn't like that the coach hit the field or called for a field goal at the end of the
We don't
game,
get to criticize.
we can't do that.
You can talk about it. You just can't criticize.
I mean, that's how silly that law is, in my opinion, though. I mean,
That's in our contract.
That's not law.
Okay.
That's contractual.
It's not a law.
Well,
That's in your collective bargaining agreement.
Fair.
That is, okay.
where is that standard? Or did that populate from something?
You know, when you,
That's probably-
and again, I come from a background that's very different in terms of the way boards operate. I recognize that. But when we talk about the idea of us being an ear to have the community be able to talk to us, my experience has always been it should filter up to the board, not down to the board. In other words, the issues should be coming to the focus groups and to the school, and then those issues should be coming to us. For example, I have somebody downtown talking to me the other day. You guys need to get civics into the school, and they need to be doing the Pledge of Allegiance every single day in the classroom. So I don't disagree with that. But I just said, I don't know what whether, I don't even know whether we're doing that here, to be quite honest.
But
with you.
see, there's my,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to hear your concerns to
So I
build the
would rather
trust that we are.
That came from there, and coming up this direction, and me trying to answer that question.
No.
I
That's where
mean,
you say.
And
Have you met Trish or Tim?
does that make sense what I'm saying?
But yeah,
In other words, we're not the conduit. I don't see,
really.
I back up. My experience is that the board is not the conduit that hears all the complaints and sends them down to the administration to solve. Things that the parent are unhappy with should come straight to the people at the school who they're unhappy with. And if it deals with policy, then it should filter up to us to deal with it.
Board's the last stop.
Yeah, not the first step.
Correct.
But the community sees you
Oh, I know.
as community elected.
I know that.
Yeah, and so that's what this discussion is, right?
Right, yeah. Now, if the complaint is about the board, it comes to the board. Right? If the complaint is about the superintendent, it comes to the board. But if the complaint is, about a teacher or the principal, it starts there. It eventually comes to the board.
And Joe, I mean, policy KL is on the front screen of my phone because I send it to people constantly.
Yeah.
Here's a link.
And there's
Absolutely.
nothing wrong
Yeah.
with listening
And
empathetically,
Danny's amazing.
obviously, right?
We've had one thing filter, one or two since I've been on the board. So
And I think about like that specific example you just shared,
What?
that specific example you just shared, that's information. It's not really a complaint. Somebody needs to know. There's a board policy on the flag salute. Yes, we do it in our schools. And yes, there civics is taught at K-12 in our schools. What more specifics do you need?
Yeah.
Right.
Because I think sometimes people will bring concerns and it's like, wait a minute. We do that. They just don't know that we do that.
See, that's
So-
just me. I can't answer that question. And all I
Correct.
can do is do like you said, Cassie, have a link, you say.
well,
I think
It's not always
But I wouldn't send KL to that. I'd
No,
say,
That's
hey,
correct.
Trish or Tim, can you
Came
answer
up.
this question for me so I can get back to
Right,
that?
it's not always a
community member
complaint.
and help?
Yeah.
And so I replied, hey, I don't know the specific curriculum, but I do know that there are social study classes that have to attend a public meeting. And we sign forms for kids saying, yes, you were at this particular board meeting. And they have a choice of the board meeting or the city council or the board of commissioners. So I was able to give a specific example of that being implemented. And they said, thank you.
But you can always ask,
right.
Yeah.
and we'll get you those answers.
And that is something that, because of my love of community in our district, I want to stop those.
Yeah.
Right? I want to say, oh, hey, I've been stopped outside of the post
It's like
office,
sandbox.
waved down. What are they doing at the school? And I was like,
Right.
hold, please, I'll get back to you.
And you don't have to know everything, right? I mean, and that's where, and Tim, tell me if I'm wrong, but like, my guess is that, and because not everything is a complaint either. And just like Trish said, like, there are often answers that are like, well, we do this and we do that. And it's just informational. It's just correcting maybe misinformation that's out there that maybe you don't have, and that's okay, because you are not necessarily going to know everything that's happening in the classroom, but knowing, like, but I know somebody who could get you this information. And that is often your role as a board member. And so my guess is that, you all would want to have a heads up about what folks are hearing in the community so that answers could be given, so that you are a conduit in that way to correct information.
Right.
That is gonna come
That
from the
could generate
district.
Krista, a Facebook post.
Right.
That says,
Yeah.
did you know,
Right.
we have this, and that's helping close that gap of
Right.
distrust.
And then if there are things out there that, Tim and his team are hearing that like from multiple folks, like from a number of you that, they're like, oh, this is a theme. Then the districts can take action on that, like, wow, there's a gap in knowledge out here in the community and so having a heads up that, what you're hearing out there is important, but you don't necessarily have to have all that information, but knowing who to relay that to is important.
Well, I don't want to take what you're doing away from you right now, but to me, I don't want to sound like I'm being disrespectful to Dustin and Chad or Cassie for what you're, the proposal. I'm more curious, I guess, what do you hope to gain out of the idea of having that kind of public meeting or whatever the case may be, where you bring people in? What do you gain from doing that? What do you hope to, what is it you're hoping to hear?
Well, I live it every day, first of all.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not-
yeah.
but,
Work, yeah.
I know it was during a bond that I came up with the bagels for the board and like, come ask questions, but we didn't end up doing it. It was just an idea, and I do want. Exactly that. Well, we need to be doing the pledge. Well, I want the people that have the knowledge to be able to right there. Oh, no, we do. I like that idea. I don't have a desire. I just want our community and the factions within our community to know that we are doing great things. And we,
Kristen,
I'll answer that.
I had read that. An option is that you would bring the community together for like a town hall, they would write their questions out. The board would then take those questions. Everybody disperse. The board takes them as a whole,
Mhm.
has a meeting, talks about them,
Mhm.
kind of works through them, and then they have another town hall. Come back for our responses, and then the responses are given as a whole,
Yeah,
as a whole.
that's an option that can help put some of those questions into themes that the board can then answer all at once. That is an option. I've seen boards do that. Yep.
Dustin, you.
Yeah, I was gonna answer, and obviously no disrespect, Joe, so none taken or whatever. Great conversation, appreciate it. I think what my goal would be is to, I think there's a perception that the board, maybe this is in the past, but is a little disconnected from the values of the community, like Chad was saying earlier. So just my goal, whatever it would look like, bagels, technology, whatever, is just close that gap. And it may even just be more like a feeling that we represent the community and people in the community know that they feel heard. And then the other part of it is just like this. I really do have a desire to want to know as much as I can about what people are thinking and feeling. And that's how great ideas, get put into place is you get input from people. And so I'm all about empowering people to feel like you can speak up and you can share and you can give your ideas and share your concerns. And so there's just a desire to have what's called.
I don't disagree with
that
either of
box,
those. I
yeah.
just, it's, to me, it's the vehicle. What's the vehicle?
Yeah, I don't have the answer for it. So, but that's what I think is the desire.
So my desire for more community input basically is. I want the kids supported, and for the kids to be supported, the district has to be supported. And if the community is afraid of the curriculum, the values, what the educational outcomes, we want to do the best we can to allay those fears and tell them or show them what we believe are the right ways to educate their children. Basic floor there is teach them kids is what one of the people on the first board I served with. His constant mantra was teach them kids. And so. And we don't want people to be afraid of what we're teaching the kids.
Real quick. I just think we need to have the most effective use of technology possible to receive that feedback. And I know we have tools like Parent Square, and that's an attempt. It sounds like not a lot is applied to Parent Square, but I'm not positive. That's my perception. I think I've heard mention bagels with the board several times, but also kind of a tongue in cheek that, it'll be the board having bagels.
it will be the board eating
So
bagels.
what's the best way to open that up to the community? Is there a better way? certainly there's gonna be bias no matter how you do it, because you can't force random controlled trials upon people.
Gary can.
Maybe have.
He called me
ballots
one
just so
time
people
before I was
know
on the board.
Yeah,
We're attempting, it's like, you know, if you chose.
and maybe that's
The
the
ex-
start.
The knowledge, you know.
I thought Tanya's input was pretty interesting.
Yeah,
I think
and there's
I thought that
multiple
was-
ways. I'm gonna move us on, but there's, you know, I mean, it may take some trial and error too.
People can email me. I say I forward on all communications. People say, please pass this on to the board, but I can create a Google Doc or whatever as questions come in and just keep dumping
Yeah.
into them. And
That's-
then,
But you want the community to know the board is. connected.
We'll send it to the board and it's time.
No, I agree. with
And,
that.
and we can do those electronic things. I go back to, we'll have to define what the community is. Are you interested in what your parents are thinking? Are you interested in what the parents in Three Rivers are thinking? Are you worried about what somebody in North Carolina is thinking? Because they all have that same access, right?
Yeah.
So if it's on Facebook.
Yeah.
Who do you want to hear from? Once we determine that, then we can figure out the tool, the vehicle for getting the information, but we can do all that. So.
Next scenario, has to do with executive session. So board held an executive session last week dealing with a student. This week at the post office, a community member approached you and asked you a specific question about something that was discussed in the executive session. What do you do? Does everybody know what an executive session is?
You've already have it.
You've already had one? Okay. What do you do in this scenario? Right?
We don't talk about executive session.
Virtual Fight Club.
Yeah, don't talk about that.
You can tell
Tell
them, then
them.
you have to shoot.
You can tell them, but then you have to see them.
we are live.
I wrote down one of your good
ideas.
ideas. I don't think that's.
Don't write that one down.
Guess what OSBA is gonna be talking about tomorrow. Cause this didn't happen in executive session. Completely. Gary.
What would you say?
The same thing.
Yeah,
I've been there.
Say you weren't there, yeah.
I'd say lie, Joe, great.
So what if, so the reason that we put this one is because this one, so if you have an executive session that is dealing with a student, let's say that this is about student expulsion. Sometimes people who have students in school are gonna know some details about that because their kids may be friends with that student who is expelled or something like that. So they're gonna know what you've been talking about, not because of you, but because their student is in that school. And so somebody comes up to you and is like, hey, I heard, student A, was expelled or like something, did you read about that? What would you say? Because it's important how you approach that response. How do you respond to that if that person already has some information?
I cannot talk about specific children or personnel. I can't talk about anything really in executive session.
I wouldn't even mention executive session. She doesn't. She may be fishing. She may not know there was an executive session. with the student.
Yeah, because you give up that you were having.
Well, so then you say, and this was discussed in executive session and I can't talk.
I'll go with Joe now. I wasn't
Say you
there.
weren't
Because if you read
Well,
that,
I think they're
it's
saying,
usually-
what Tim is saying is that you don't even want to
Yeah.
divulge the fact that there was an executive session, that it was talking about before.
Right,
So that's giving up information by even mentioning executive session.
right.
Yeah,
But I like the first part of what you said, which is basically, hey, as a board member, oh, I can't talk about individual
Right.
students or teachers. Just.
you don't want to confirm any details at all. So, so if somebody's like, hey, did you, have you heard about this? Did you talk about this? You don't want to say something like, I can't talk about student A, or what, I can't talk about what we discussed in executive session regarding this or anything. If they don't, exactly as one of you just said, if they don't know that you've had an executive session about that, you don't want to link the executive session to that student. If they do know that you do have to post that you've had an executive session, if they know that you've had an executive session, but they're asking about student A. You can always set, they're like, did you have an executive session? You can confirm that you did, but you're still not confirming it was about anybody. And it is important for folks to know that you are legally bound to not discuss anything, and you can't discuss anything with anybody at home. Or anybody anywhere. In fact, even the notes that you take or any documentation that you have during executive session should go back into executive session files. You shouldn't even be taking anything with you home, because all of that is protected. Questions or thoughts about executive session stuff?
Will you?
Yeah.
Go over media?
Yes. So media in Oregon, this is a strange law that we have. Media outlets can be at your executive sessions with a couple of exceptions. They cannot be at executive sessions that have to deal with students. They also cannot be there so one of the reasons you can go into executive session is to discuss litigation or litigation likely to be filed with an attorney. If a media outlet is the subject of that litigation or litigation likely to be filed, that media outlet cannot be there. But they can sit in on your executive session. They cannot report what you talk about unless you get off topic. So one of those things, and then you're breaking the law. So one of the pieces that's really important about executive session is that the reason that you go into it, you have to really stay on topic. And you're just talking about what you've gone into. It is easy to get off topic because, you start, one of the executive sessions I sit in on a lot is superintendent evaluation, because I facilitate those all the time. And when we start talking about superintendent goals, it's easy to start talking about district goals and overall district performance. And I'm constantly like, nope, we got to really get back on track here. And it is really easy to just start talking about district stuff altogether. If a media outlet is there and you start going off on something else, you've given up your right to privacy in that meeting. But so it is an interesting law that media outlets can attend. It's all for since they can't report, it's all for some background information. If you eventually make a decision, they still can't report on it, but they can have this background information, but they can't report. But you may, from time to time, depending on the topic, get a person from the media there.
You'll see that we have executive session starting in a little bit. And we'll have our attorney here, but we'll also have media here today. So
Okay.
they've notified us that they will be attending.
Okay. All right. So you get practice with that right away.
I'll also say the media
And shoot them.
uses executive session to get the information, and that gives them the information to go talk to people
Go fishing.
To fish.
that would have the information that was the topic of executive session, and they get that person to say something, they can report on that. So oftentimes it looks like they're reporting on your executive session, and they may even come back to you because they say, well, I already talked to so-and-so and they said X, Y, Z. No, can't talk to them.
Yeah.
So.
And the media
Yeah.
gets to make the decision if we go off topic and
Makes
then
sense.
everything's open. That's up to them.
It's most of them, I will say, in my experience,
It seems like
most of them are knowledgeable and really good about it. In my experience, and if there's a different experience here, you can fill me in on that. They will give you a pretty wide berth. But if it's really clear that you go into executive session to talk about litigation, and all of a sudden you're talking about superintendent evaluation, the reasons you can go in are really well defined. And so it's generally pretty clear if you've crossed a line. Because the reasons you can go in are tight. And So if you've veered into some other category, what I have heard of is that a reporter will say, sometimes a reporter will say, hey, you're a little off topic. And not report, but help the board remember that. But I will also say, you know, it's incumbent upon everybody to watch that as well, and any of you can say, you know, let's make sure. Let's make sure we all stand
We
up.
had one of the newspapers tell us that one.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that can be helpful. I mean, that can,
Yeah, he just was
And
like.
then on the
getting
other
off.
side,
yeah,
I remember a reporter calling me and I had not attended a particular executive session. And I had gotten a report from the superintendent kind of about what it was. But I wasn't there and I said, isn't this under, executive session? And no, he was really trying to trick me into saying something. And if I say something, then it opens up whatever he did hear about, whatever the topic was, in executive session, because he got a board member to talk about it.
mhm, mhm,
So it opens doors that are supposed to stay shut.
right. And there are really very few reasons you can go into executive session. And the vast majority of your conversations that are uncomfortable are gonna be had in public, because that's the point of being a public body, is that the public gets to see most of what you do as you're busy. I'm gonna skip that one in favor of, okay. How about this one? The board is having a heated debate or discussion at a board meeting. Board members are interrupting each other while speaking, accusing some board members they're not putting kids first with their decision. Board members are being disrespectful to one another. They're attacking each other's character. The chair uses the gavel to get attention and asks board members to be respectful. These are all questions that can be we don't have to answer these in succession. When a board meeting is being disrupted, is there a process to follow? How would you describe the situation? Is it okay for board members to disagree? And what are some tools that boards can adopt in situations like these? How would you handle this? What do you think about this?
Well, I learned after watching a meeting out of Eugene that you could gavel out for a recess.
Yeah, you can recess. Absolutely.
Well, but they did like a stand. They stood up, stand down, stand back. Maybe I didn't learn. Maybe I just remember. But it was just everybody stand up. This is the moment.
Oh, okay. So they just like stood
I have
up,
to Go back and.
took like a break, everybody took a breath, they just.
Dad was already in it. It was just,
Joe's be like, let's.
it was, she said, yeah, I don't know. And so we ended up talking at OSBA actually last year and talking about. Yes, that there was a little moment that you could just stand up to stop the situation,
Sure, yeah,
stop the
absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah, right.
So my understanding is we have a policy that we follow Robert's Rules of Order, right?
Yes.
That's we've agreed we're gonna follow those, and so then we have this little thing here, the cheat sheet for that. I was reading through it earlier.
What do we do?
Um,
That's great.
there was a whole bunch of different things you could do here, so
Debbie's good at one.
Gary has it all memorized. So we'll just say, Gary, what do we do?
We adjourn.
Yep.
Second that. Okay. We have a motion on the floor. We have.
That's a pretend motion. I think Debbie will call for point of order.
Yep, point of order
and
as well.
Has done that in the past.
Tim will ask the board chair to table the conversation, so
Do that.
that we can get additional information.
Yeah,
Be rude, we have to sneak out to it.
Sneak out.
We can do it.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you guys for being here.
So much.
Yeah.
Oh, they'll be back.
Okay.
They're not going away.
Come back to the pizza.
It is.
so Robert's Rules is a tool, absolutely. What do you think about the way that some of this discussion is characterized?
It's okay for board members to disagree. It's not okay for board members to get nasty.
Yeah.
That's when chaos
Yeah.
happens across the district.
Right.
Because
What do you-
even if I didn't see the board meeting last night, I'm gonna hear about it when I get to work. The other, because reunion always has somebody here. And they're gonna be like, oh, Fred was awful last night. You should go back and watch the recording. or whatever.
Right.
You said earlier, conflict, not combat.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
like that. Thank you.
I think it would be really hard to hear from somebody that I wasn't putting kids first, right? I mean, there are ways in which, that we can speak to each other that would put us on the defensive immediately, right? And you all identified one of your strengths as all being here for the same reason, right? And so, so again, that sort of respect piece, I mean, in this situation, attacking each other's character, not putting kids first, that is going to create a hostile environment. Another thing that I would point out is, and it sounds like you may do this already if you follow Robert's rules and if you know it pretty well, it's a lot of pressure on just the chair to run the meeting, especially if it starts falling apart in any way. Yeah. Anybody has the power to call point of order, but also to say something about, to speak to how the meeting is going. And do you have a board operating agreement? By any chance?
Do not.
The organizational meeting,
No board operating agreement.
That's how we're gonna
Yeah,
behave. at
Like,
work.
yeah, this is how we're gonna behave,
We don't.
anything like that, operating protocol?
Mm-mm, we do
No,
not.
okay,
No, I looked into it last year.
okay. This is
Never.
one of the things I'll recommend at the end of our meeting, but it's a set of expectations that you all have for each other. But any of you could say, at the right time, that we expect ourselves to operate in a way that is respectful, even in disagreement. It's hard for all of that to fall on the chair, but you're all the member of the team. So, but I like what you said about, the tools being Robert's rules. There is a process. Cassie, I really love your example of like maybe just taking like a quick break to stand up and take a breath. That can interrupt a situation really nicely. I hadn't heard that one.
Jumping jacks.
Yeah,
Well,
Go for a jog.
yeah. Jog around the table really quickly.
so there were some community members that we were concerned about disrupting the meeting, and we had extra police presence beforehand.
Mm,
And I think the board has the authority to ask someone to be escorted out.
If it's a community member. Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
And I've always thought, if things got too bad and name calling was going on, then I would stand up and say, excuse me, I don't want to be a part of this, and walk out. Is that a possibility?
Go ahead, Cassie. Did you want to say something? In response.
Yes, but you're acting as one at that point.
Right, I'm acting as one,
So if you,
but the more people who follow me out of the room, then you lose a quorum. If that was.
I think
it's when you're taking a vote side
Right.
publicly and.
probably better to recess. It's probably better to recess, although what I have seen, there are times, so if we're talking about community.
Yeah.
Disrupting the meeting at this point, I have seen, so recess is a good tool. Letting a situation maybe calm down. And unfortunately, I have seen situations where a meeting needed to be adjourned. But the community had plenty of notice that like the board business cannot be done in this situation, we're gonna recess. If we come back, if we still can't do the business of the board, we're gonna have to adjourn. And it's not a threat, it's reality. If the business of the board cannot get done, that's rare. A lot of times a recess will take care of it. Debbie, I have seen the same thing where somebody had to be asked to leave. Again, that's a last resort. But I would operate, if you can, as a whole board. And so if you're gonna recess as a whole board.
So I think it just comes down to respect.
Right.
in all our future meetings, you know, we just be very respectful to each other.
Yeah.
Not talk over each other even, listen,
It's okay to disagree.
Yeah,
People of good
absolutely.
conscience.
never be
Disagree.
disrespectful,
Right.
attacking.
So maybe talk about public meeting. I heard this saying something about it's a meeting
Of the board.
in something in. public.
In
Of the
public,
bo- it's-
not a
it's
public meeting.
Right, it's a meeting of the board in public, it's not a public meeting,
Right.
it's not a meeting of the public,
With the public, yeah.
yes.
You get to watch us
So-
do our job, but
I'd
not
like you
necessarily.
to speak on that.
So we were talking about this earlier, that it's, you know, the public gets to watch you do your business. That is their right, it's their legal right. They get to watch you do the vast majority of your business. Their participation in your meeting is not afforded to them by law. You afford them their participation as by policy through public comment. And if there's disruption to your meeting, you know, and you can't do the business of the board, you can stop that meeting. There is a high threshold for trespassing somebody or asking people to leave, because you get to, you know, you get to have your meetings in public. And the public gets to view your meetings. I have also seen situations where the board has said, like, we can't operate in this way, but we have to do our meetings, where the meeting has gone to Zoom.
Mhm.
And there is everybody can still watch it, but the board is meeting in a different room. Again, all of these are relatively rare and last resort stuff. But the participation piece is, again, it is a community building piece, but it is not guaranteed to the public.
So is that state law or is that federal?
It's state.
That they don't have to
That-
comment.
Yeah, I mean,
That
it's
they don't
just-
get to participate.
And it's not any law that says like the public does not get to participate. It's just that there is no law saying that they get to, right?
So our policy, is a question, is our policy that, we allow at each of our meetings, public comment, but only if it's something related to the agenda?
Correct.
Has to be on
Is that your
the-
policy?
I mean, they could say it and then
The way
come
we
up. and say
operate.
what
I believe it's
guess, but-
operation, I don't believe it's a policy,
I don't, we have a policy.
and I think you can change that.
Sure. We inform public at the beginning of the meeting what the rules are. We have a little card that tells them on the back that they could give us a card, and tell us they want to speak to an agenda item, and we give them 3 minutes.
And do we, do it at the agenda item or just at the, like? We're
At the agenda.
at the agenda item?
So we do have
Typically, sometimes
BDDA,
discretion of the chair.
which is public comments at board meeting.
Does it say it has to be on the agenda?
Does it?
It almost doesn't matter because they could say it's about the agenda and get up.
Oh, they got real good.
Get up and say whatever they want,
Goes.
right?
It says public comment is limited to its designated place on the agenda while time allows.
Are you in BDDH?
I'm gonna give you one more.
Sure.
Superintendent
This
has,
was a great one. last
yeah,
year.
I figured it might be around here. Superintendent has closed school due to inclement weather. Parents and staff are frustrated and disagree that school should be closed and that a delay would have sufficed. The board was not notified of the decision, and individual board members are now receiving several emails and calls from parents and staff asking for a response and reasons why there's a school closure. What's the role of the board?
I wasn't there that day.
There's a theme here. I wasn't at the
Now, look,
executive
I
session. I
just wanna
wasn't
say that
there.
It was an.
Transportation could not get enough bus drivers to send the buses, all right? I'm blaming it all on Jeremy and I'm living with it.
You put that just because you knew.
No, I did not. This goes to every single board.
Throw them under the bus.
Literally.
Well, yeah, that's what we get when we hire a guy from the
I would-
coast.
I would tell you that it wouldn't harm him. I cannot imagine myself not informing the board, but
Sure, sure.
let's assume I have it.
Yeah, let's assume that you don't know about this and you're hearing from the community that is frustrated. What is the role of the board in this kind of decision?
I would think support the superintendent,
Yes.
but then have a conversation with the
Then
superintendent.
call him and tell him he's an idiot. Only two board
Don't do
members
that.
did that. They didn't say idiot, they were nicer.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you want to expand on that, you say, well, at 4 o'clock this morning, it appeared that the ice would be so bad that nobody would be able to drive a bus.
One of my favorite things to have said last year was. Superintendent Sweeney has driven at 5 o'clock this morning the entire route. And is determined that it's fine, or not fine. But the dedication of our operation, you know, transportation, all of them are out driving, which I didn't know until this year. Before they make the call, they drive the route. To make sure it's okay. And are we, I do have a question, are we on all? I asked this before. I know Three Rivers right now that they were. even-
We're in all,
We're in all.
We're not.
except for Newbridge.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we close schools, all schools are
Yeah.
closed except Newbridge, because Newbridge's calendar is so tight that if we call it a day, and don't let them to come, allow them, because they're not transporting students, they're walking over from the prison, right? So if they can get staff there, they can get a day in. So what happened last year is because we called the day, they ended up taking the day, a snow day. And then they had to make that up during spring break, which annoys their staff because their calendar is so tight with how many days they're required by law to be in session that they couldn't afford to take the day. So
And I think Three Rivers,
allows, if they close Cave Junction, they don't have to close Merlin.
Right.
Right.
It's funny, a lot of these examples where we're getting the individual feedback issues,
Mhm.
it's like, we're really playing the role of a spokesperson for the district. Right, and in that situation, you just gotta go back to it's. Superintendent Sweeney's call, and he's
Yeah.
always looking for the safety of our students
Mhm.
and our staff first, and he made the decision with that in mind.
Yeah, and don't worry. he'll make you
Until
come back
10 a.m.
to the School year.
Yeah.
Wake up with it.
This is an
That makes
operational
everybody happy
decision,
too.
right? Yeah, the role of the board is to support. This is not a board decision, it's an operational decision. Of course, your superintendent is gonna let you know. Right, this case is an anomaly. If for
Well,
whatever reason you
not
didn't
really.
know. I mean, and then the fact that your superintendent would not let you know, of course, you know, you're gonna know, but like, but it's not a board vote, it's not a board decision, it's an operational decision.
I like that. It's not a
Yeah.
board decision, it's
Day-
an
Day-to-day
operation.
operations. you
Day-to-day
trust
operations.
to-
Okay, what I wanna do, I'm gonna,
Can I just answer a question just really quick?
Yeah.
It is our board policy. Person speaking during the public comment portion of the meeting may comment only on an agenda.
I,
So Cassie will have to shut them down if they get on top of it.
we don't know. Stand up, lady. Stand up.
Don't maybe come over
Hey,
there. with
follow
that
me.
gavel.
Good luck.
Figure out what that is.
Use
You
your
know,
gavel.
And we're gonna give, so that, what was Dr. Bloomquist, that flip the lid, 20 minutes for
Oh, yeah.
relation, yeah. Regulation and
a couple things I just wanna, this will be the last thing that I bring to you. There's just a few tools for collaboration that we recommend, and this is collaboration between or among all of you, and then between you and your superintendent. Having a strong superintendent evaluation process is both for accountability and support, and can be a real force for collaboration. So we've got a tool, I don't know what you use for your superintendent evaluation process. We have a tool that we recommend. One of the strengths of that process, no matter what you use, though, something that we recommend are quarterly check-ins that if they meet the definition of evaluative in nature, you can have them in executive session. The reason that we recommend those is because, I don't know, if you're me, my evaluation is due in June. I want Steve Kelly, my boss, to tell me throughout the year how he thinks I'm doing, not just hand me my evaluation in June and have any of it be a surprise. And so, so when you adopt your superintendent evaluation process, we recommend that be at the beginning of the process, right after one ends. You adopt the timeline, the tool, and the process, so that everybody again has common expectations, so that you as a board know what you're gonna be evaluating, the timeline that's gonna happen on. And so does Tim. Tim knows that as well. He knows what he's gonna be evaluated on. He knows what the expectations are. And then you meet quarterly to discuss those things. And if things are going really well, great, you know, like you get updates, he gets your support, you move on. If there's anything that like, you know, that goals need to be adjusted or anything like that, that happens throughout the year. The actual evaluation at the end of the year becomes much easier because you've checked in throughout the year. Board self-assessment, we recommend that you do this every year, regardless of how you do it. We obviously facilitate these regardless how you do it. This is something that we recommend you look at your functioning, your processes, and evaluate yourself. We recommend you do it at the end of the year, not at the beginning of the year. You also want your new board members to get, you know, their sea legs. Having a board operating agreement, which is a prioritized list of what you expect from each other and how you operate together. If you look at our website, you'll see like a list of like 16 things that that look like a board operating agreement. When I facilitate these, I'm like, well, take these 16 common things that we normally see and narrow them to 5. Like prioritize what you would want to see from each other, because nobody can remember 16 things. And then we would say the same thing with a board superintendent operating agreement. That's a prioritized list of what does the board want to see from the superintendent, and what does the superintendent expect of the board? Again, all of this relates to what are the common expectations. And finally, communication protocols. How do you expect, so a couple of examples of this are, how do you expect him to communicate with you, say, when there's an emergency, when there's a crisis? If you've got 7 different expectations of, well, I would want a phone call, I would want a text, I would want an email, that may be impossible for him to manage. And so if there's something where like he needs to be on the ground, but he needs to let you know some really quick information, developing common expectations for certain kinds of communication, so he's got 1 expectation instead of 7, that's going to be really helpful. So again, all with the idea of having common expectations that are articulated explicitly, is all to the good and all relationship building.
So I might mention superintendent evaluations. A long time, in my experience, it was like new board members would say, well, I've never seen him do this, that's that person's job.
Mhm.
But the superintendent is in charge of that person and making sure that that person does the job. And so if that happens, then you can say, yes, this is a good evaluation. This is a good point for this superintendent, even though it's a subordinate that did the job. It's still under his responsibility and the job got done. Or if it didn't get done, then it's on the superintendent. We don't evaluate the staff. We evaluate, was the job done, because it's the superintendent's job to make sure, yes.
Except when the staff below the superintendent is very good and giving the jobs done.
Policy review.
Yeah.
I was at a board meeting and had long-serving board member surprised me by saying that they reviewed the entire policy.
The whole policy manual.
Yeah. You've seen that done?
I have. There are policy nerds out there who read the whole policy manual. Sure.
I haven't told you guys have done it yet.
What?
You haven't read it yet?
Nerd.
We have to read it.
Got a
We
lot of
were
that.
guided through the entire policy book by an OSBA.
If you, well, anytime you have a policy update,
Oh, no, this was.
oh, you had your policy revision,
Yes,
the whole thing, okay, yep, then you're gonna see the vast majority of it. You're gonna read it,
Wait a minute.
it takes a long time.
It takes a long time.
So in the past, you guys have done,
I've never been a part of that.
I'm gonna tell you that it probably happened in 2004.
Ah,
Because I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of policies that are 04
uh-huh,
and
Yeah.
haven't been
Okay.
renewed since, which would still be within your time frame, but not yours. There you go.
yeah, okay.
interesting.
We can do that. That's what the board, we're not gonna do it this summer, but we could do it next summer. Cause you're gonna charge us 10 grand to do that.
No.
Something, I'm not sure, policy department would know that, yeah.
Yeah,
And what, just overview, what does that look like?
you really sit down with every policy and go through it with OSBA. Some of them go very quickly. But then you put revised 2024.
Oh, so then they're all revised. At that time.
Each one is discussed.
Each one's discussed. It is, but policy nerds love that stuff. So. We did it in Cook Hill.
No,
It's a
I
big
didn't know
one.
that was a thing.
Oh, it's like
How long does that take?
months and months.
And I would say that the ones that are 2004, a lot of those were optional policies.
I guess we also had. Optional nerds.
Joe, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I have a question. Are you guys involved at all in any kind of accreditation?
No, we're not a regulatory body, I don't.
My question that I posed very beginning was simply, where's the funding from OSBA or for OSBA?
Where does funding come
Or
from
revenue.
for us?
Yeah.
So part of our funding comes from dues. So you are members and you pay dues for that. You pay for me to be here today, so some of it comes from contracting fees. A lot of it comes from, so we have an investment account, an endowment that we make money from that subsidizes everything that we don't make from dues and fees. So that's where the rest of it comes from.
And the
No,
membership is per student?
based on a
It's
student.
based on ADM.
Yes.
On
It's based on,
And then. For example, the policy reviews or
yeah, policy services or
we pay for
bills.
that. Those kind of things. So
Yeah, so there are subscriptions that you can get, and so policy would be the other department that does produce revenue. Yeah,
So-
board development department and policy department produce revenue,
So,
not enough.
Do a conference a year?
We do 2 conferences a year. We do one in summer, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. And then we do our big one in the fall in Portland, that about 800 to 1,000 folks come to.
That's the one we're going.
Pardon me?
That's
That's-
the one we're going.
Yeah, what's the date of that?
Veterans Day weekend.
Yeah, 10th, 11th, 12th, something in there.
So I have one question for the board. We've been working together for a month now. I've communicated through text and through email. How's that working for you?
Say that again.
I've been communicating to the board through text and through email. So when we had the teacher pass away in the car wreck, I'd give you a text that something was going on, that we had lost the teacher, then I'd let you know what had happened. When we were getting ready for this day, sent you information, and then we decided that maybe we didn't want to do the second half of tonight's until Nathan got back, and so I sent you more information. Got asked about the health center, sent you information. Is that working for you? Is there things you want to see different from me or from Tanya on how we're communicating with the board?
I have a question about, again, the public meeting, texting and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you ask a question of us, we can't all respond.
You cannot, and I will try very hard not to ask a question of you. The question may be, do you want to have 2 meetings this month or 1? And you can tell me 2 or 1.
Yeah.
It's not of substance, right? I'm never gonna ask you a question of substance. So. And if I have, let me know, because I try really hard not to.
And again, I never even thought about it until today.
Right.
But you also cannot reply there, but reply separately.
Okay, I gotta figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
Not reply all.
just reply to me directly.
Right, and that, yeah, even on a
But
text. message.
always I will try to put in there always, I won't say always, but I try to put in there. I'm available, call me.
Yeah.
Right.
Come by the office, talk to me if you need to, but, and on emails, I try to say, do not respond all. Right, so. But when we're just setting up a board meeting, if we're moving a section from today to August 8th, we're not breaking any rules. Yes, August 8th works better for me than on July 31st. So. But if we start talking about what's in the agenda and things like
One
that.
little trick you could use
Mhm.
to help from accidental stuff is I think you can put us all in the VCC. But we
On-
can't reply all.
That part's
We can
true.
reply to you, but we
Yeah.
can't reply all.
Yes,
That could eliminate errors,
Innocent errors
innocent errors.
are,
Unless you
Fine.
really don't want to know something.
yeah, I try to just email the
Yeah.
school board and Tanya with.
I think that it's something to be cautious about, but it's not something to bog down over. Am I correct in saying that?
I've done it 16 years and nobody's called me out on it yet.
Right, I mean,
And so,
I don't want, how do you feel about policy BBH? You know, tell me your concerns and we're all, but if they're, like I asked the other night, is everybody good for Monday? I didn't expect. And it was only, are we all still on, is what I. So if you're uncomfortable replying, reply alone.
or don't
Not back
reply and
or don't reply.
And then Tanya will call you.
But we all-
I haven't heard from you.
I think we're all, I mean, the spirit of the law, is for a reason, we all understand it, so.
Yeah, the
Yes.
spirit of the law.
I just want to make sure the texting is
Trying
working
to-
for you and that the
Conversation
emails that I've been
outside.
sending are working.
Getting plenty of information, just wanna make sure we're replying right.
Yes,
Don't, you're fine.
I'll show you.
and I would, and
That's the-
I will stop it if I feel like it's,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, you've responded. I've asked you not to respond.
Wah.
Please stop. Cause I don't want you to get in trouble and I don't want to be in trouble and,
But again, the spirit of it.
Yeah.
And know that, so the other part of my job besides going out to districts and doing this is we at OSBA answer questions all day long. And so if you've got a question, like you can email or call, like that is.
Very responsive. I usually-
and that's a free part of
Yep.
the service.
That's just part of your membership is
Right.
just
And then you'll
advice
just
and
have your
questions.
favorites. Vince, Kristen, Spencer.
Right, Spencer is everybody's favorite. He's our policy director. He's everybody's favorite.
And you'll also, when we go in the fall, you'll get faces
Yep.
and relationships
Yep.
with people
Absolutely.
there.
Yep.
Anything else I can do for you today?
We appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having
That's
me.
great
Yeah.
scenarios.
Good. Good. Supposed to be helpful.
We gotta take a little 10-minute break before we start executive session. Get up, stretch a little bit.
Did you all start
We're
this
still
morning? Is this a big day?
recording.
We started about 8.
Wow, big day.
We went on a tour of the facility, so we haven't just been sitting here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
We're gonna have Rebecca up.
Am I,
here.
am I gaveling?
No. Into executive session for a
So-
break and then.
10-minute break.
Nice job.
Right, we'll reconvene general session. Adjourn general session.
We're done.
The end, we're done.